30. The date is Tuesday, May 25th. I'd like to call to order the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners. Our invocation today is led by Commissioner Zylstra, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Katie Sims is going to lead us in that. Please rise.
Lord, bless us as we meet to discuss matters of well-being of Ottawa County residents. Impart your wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful and equitable conclusion. May we continue to seek your guidance, courage, and strength. Be with us in our deliberations and grant the gift of your grace in the decisions we make for the good of all those who have placed their trust and confidence in our leadership.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Sherry is going to read the roll. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, go for it, Sherry.
Okay, Mr. Garcia,
Here.
Mr. Baumann,
Here.
Mr. Zylstra,
Here.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Here.
Mr. Meppelenk,
Here.
Mr. Terpstra,
Here.
Mr. Hoflor,
Present.
Mr. DeYoung,
Here.
Mr. Kyers, Mr. Bergman,
Here.
Mr. Fensky.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next thing on the agenda is presentation of petitions and communications. Do you have anything, Katie or Sherry?
No, we do not.
Okay, I'm going to do some customer service awards. And first, I'm going to ask Marie Snyder to join me. Where did she go? There she is. All right. So I'm going to speak into the microphone here. Okay. So Marie has received the internal first quarter outstanding service award for 2021 today. She was nominated for assisting an older gentleman with obtaining an affidavit for the reissuance of a check. Since Marie works for Water Resources, she could have easily let the treasurer's office handle the process. Instead, Marie took it upon herself to work with the gentleman to ensure that the document was completed, signed, and returned to the treasurer the next day. Maria's nominator stated, "It's a little thing. She could have easily let it go through the mail, but she took the time, her time, to see it through. Thank you, Marie, for your willingness to serve others." Next, Rachel Asasi. Did I say it right?
Close.
I was close. So Rachel has received the external first quarter outstanding customer service today as well. She received 8 individual nominations for her assistance with helping residents access the COVID-19 vaccine. Many of the nominations included comments on Rachel's community outreach to non-English speaking residents and her assistance to individuals without internet access. One nominator noted that her heartfelt approach helped to decrease anxiety, fear, and the lack of trust experienced in the community. Thank you, Rachel, for making Ottawa County a place for everyone. So the next thing on our agenda is public comment or public health update from Lisa. And I think we have
Lisa's not on, but Darrell is.
Marcia's
They're both
on.
here.
Marcia here today. Okay.
Marcia Mansry here today, and I'd actually like to welcome Darrell up to the.
Darrell is coming up also. Okay.
Give an
Go.
epidemiology update first. Would that be all right with you?
Afternoon, Commissioners. It's always a pleasure to be with you to talk about COVID-19 epidemiology here in Ottawa County. I have a brief update today. The slides are in front of us and we'll just get started. Katie, will you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So as you've probably heard in the media and seen on national news, COVID-19 case rates are coming down across the country and also here in the state of Michigan and Ottawa County. You can see there's a couple of big peaks, so one in November and December and one in just the past few months, but those numbers are coming down considerably. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we'd have had over 32,000 cases, but the number of cases that we've had over the recent weeks have declined precipitously. And to put a number to it, the last time we reported out to all of you, we had about 84 cases being reported on average every day, and now we're at about 40 cases per day. So that liberates a lot of public health resources in order to focus on other things and also get back to many of our usual activities. So COVID-19 is improving just by the average number of cases here in Ottawa County. Next slide, please. When we look at our case rates over time, this is just a snapshot of Ottawa County with a little bit different perspective. So instead of the number of cases per day, this is the number of cases per population. And you can see that there are upticks after different holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then we had a run up in cases and then a little bit of a spike after spring break and Easter. And since then, average case rates, again, from a different perspective, are coming down. Next slide. This is a really, really busy slide, but mostly what it is just different lines indicating different age groups across Ottawa County. The main takeaway from this slide is that case rates are going down overall, but they're also going down in all of the specific age groups in Ottawa County. So there's not necessarily one specific age group that's sticking out, even though there are some that are higher than others. The general trend across the entire county is case rates are going down among all age groups. Next slide, Katie. Positivity is another metric that we keep track of. One of the main two are just case rates and positivity. All good news here as well. Since mid-April, April saw about a 20% positivity rate for a while, which was very high. 1 out of every 5 tests coming back positive. And just today, our positivity is down to about 9.1%. So cut in half since the middle of April. So again, a different perspective, but still a lot of improvement. Next slide, please. This is just a snapshot of some of the key metrics or key indicators that we keep track of here in Ottawa County. On the top are the number of cases per week. In the middle are the number of hospitalizations per week. And on the bottom are the number of deaths. So you can see that there's definitely been a stepping down in the number of cases per week. We've also seen improvements in hospitalizations from week to week just over the last few weeks. But the one thing that's stubbornly hanging on is the number of deaths. So we still are seeing deaths due to COVID-19, but those are dramatically lower than what we saw in the pandemic wave in November and December. And we attribute a lot of that protective effect to vaccination in our community. Next slide, please. When we look at our hospitals, the overall hospital capacity here in Ottawa County is improving as well. So the number of beds that are occupied overall is hovering at about 50%, but has declined a little bit in recent weeks. And COVID-19 in particular, which is the bottom figure, you can see that it ticked up to about 20% of beds being occupied by COVID-19 patients, and that number has now dropped well below 10%. So we've seen a continued decline over the weeks in the number of beds being occupied by COVID-19 patients. Next slide, please. So that last slide was all about hospital capacity overall. When we zoom into just our ICU beds, we're also seeing improvements. So the overall number of beds that have been occupied just for any kind of illness has increased over a longer period of time, but in the short term, it looks like it's starting to tick down. And we look at the number and proportion of beds that are occupied by COVID-19 patients, that number has also dropped from the teens to the 20s, all the way down to less than 10%. So again, a different perspective on hospital capacity, especially in the beds that are used for the most acute patients. There's going to be more availability for those that have other healthcare needs besides COVID-19, hopefully in the weeks ahead. Next slide. When we look at our vaccination progress here in Ottawa County, we've made tremendous improvements. Among those that are age 16 plus, over 50% of the population has had 2 vaccines, and at least 56% of the population is at least partially vaccinated. So this is just a really great milestone. Hopefully we can continue to improve and achieve that 70% goal that we're shooting for on sort of the speedometer on your screen. It's trying to get into that green area. Next slide. Among the age group that's most prone to complications and at highest risk for mortality, those age 65 plus, we've definitely achieved that goal of having 70% completely vaccinated. In Ottawa County, over 75% of people are completely vaccinated who are above the age of 65. We're a few percentage points better than the state of Michigan. And if we look at it from a little bit different perspective, which is the proportion of people 65 plus who have at least one vaccination in their arm, that number is over 80%. So hopefully this puts a lot of protection around this group and keeps them from being hospitalized or passing away, and at the very least from being infected by COVID-19. Next slide, please. When we look at vaccine effectiveness, we also see this inverse effect where the more vaccinated a population, the lower the case rates. And you can see here the different age groups that are eligible for vaccination. You can see that as you move from the left to the right, the proportion of that each one of those age groups is more and more vaccinated, and the red line is their case rates. So as vaccinations go up, case rates tend to go down. It's not a perfect trend, but you can see that the general overall trend is that the more vaccinated a population, the lower their overall case rates. This slide also gives a snapshot of one of the most recently eligible populations for vaccination, those aged 12 to 15, and you can see that over 16% of that population already has at least one vaccination in their arm. So hopefully over the summer, these vaccination rates continue to improve. And as we move into the school year this fall, the population that's currently eligible that are school age will have more protection, and hopefully our schools will see lower case rates as well. Next slide. So to sum, COVID-19 transmission appears to be slowing in the community. Case rates and test positivity are both decreasing. Our hospitals have adequate capacity, and the percent of beds that are occupied by COVID-19 patients, both overall and in ICU, are declining. The age groups that are most affected by COVID-19 right now are those in the age 10 to 19 to 20 to 2019, but overall case rates are declining across all age groups. We went over some of the vaccination rates in different age groups, and you can see that we continue to improve. So among those age 65 plus, over 75% have completed their vaccinations, and among those 16 plus, nearly 50% have completed their vaccination. And we're seeing continued correlation between being more vaccinated and having lower case rates in our population, suggesting that the vaccine is having a strong impact in protecting our community from further transmission. So thank you, commissioners. That's it for my epidemiology update.
Thanks, Darrell.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you, Darrell, very much. It's been a busy couple of weeks for us anyway, and maybe for you. Since our last public health update 2 weeks ago, there have been a lot of changes in guidance, rules, and orders for COVID-19. While we're hearing that people are pretty excited about these changes and are really starting to feel like they're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, we're also hearing that it's a little bit overwhelming to try to keep up and sort out what is and isn't okay right now. So just a short version of what the last 2 weeks held. Indoor and outdoor mask and social distancing restrictions are lifted right now for those who are fully vaccinated, and removed outdoor restrictions for unvaccinated persons. So there are some exceptions, which I'm not going to go into. Coming June 1, Michigan relaxes gathering restrictions, opening up all indoor gatherings to 50% of capacity and removing all restrictions on outdoor gatherings. The month of June is intended to be a transition month. And on July 1, MDHHS face mask orders and gathering restrictions will be lifted. So we're going to be in a critical phase between now and July 1. Yesterday, we had the welcome news that MIOSHA issued revised COVID-19 emergency rules for employers. So a lot of people are following more than one set of rules and guidance. So they largely align with what I just told you, but I'll quickly summarize some of them. They're really just 6 basic rules emphasizing employee safety. So they're allowing a return to in-person work for employees. The employer must ensure that any employees except fully vaccinated ones remain at least 6 feet from one another to the maximum extent feasible while on the work site. The employer must also ensure that any employee except fully vaccinated persons wear face coverings when they cannot consistently maintain 6 feet of separation. However, they do stipulate that fully vaccinated persons must continue to wear face coverings when in the healthcare setting where patients may be present. Now, compliance with the distancing and masking sub-rules is the responsibility of the employer, and they give several options for how they can track that. One, which includes keeping records of whether employees are fully vaccinated. Also, quarantine is only required for unvaccinated close contacts of COVID-19 cases in the workplace. All of these changes are based on three principal findings from the CDC. One, people who are fully vaccinated are at low risk of experiencing symptomatic or severe COVID-19 infection. Two, those who are fully vaccinated pose a reduced risk of transmitting COVID-19 to others. That was something we were not sure about when vaccines first became available. And three, transmission of COVID-19 outdoors is very rare. Not considering vaccine, either for vaccinated or non-vaccinated. So this flurry of rules and orders is an indication that we have reached a very important stage in our recovery from this pandemic. But as you've seen by the data Darrell showed us, we're not completely done with COVID yet. We have summer, which usually has proved to be really good. Last summer was great and we had no vaccine on board. This summer we do. Winter was rough last year. We have to go through this winter to see how that goes. So I'd like to talk to you about our vaccination efforts. As Darrell said, 12 to 15-year-olds are the newest eligible group for COVID-19 vaccination. And for the last week and a half, parents who have been waiting to get their kids vaccinated in this age group have been doing so. Once they are fully vaccinated, this means that these youth will no longer have to get tested as part of sports testing programs, and they are not subject to quarantine if they are close contacts to a case at home, in school, on their team, or because of an outbreak. So in just the first 10 days of being eligible to get a vaccine, almost 2,800 Ottawa County kids have gotten their first dose. So it's almost 1 in 5 of our population in that age group. We can add to that about 6,700 16 and 17-year-olds, which is about 1 out of every 3 of that age group. So as this school year wraps up, the health department is emphasizing with schools and families the importance of planning ahead for those that want to ensure their kids are vaccinated before school sports resume in August and school starts up in September, because they need to get 2 doses. Those doses have to be 3 weeks apart, and then they have to get 2 weeks past that last dose to be considered fully vaccinated. So that will require a little planning. To help with this, the health department is doubling up vaccine opportunities by adding Pfizer, which is the only vaccine that is eligible to people younger than 18. So adding Pfizer first dose vaccines along with Johnson & Johnson single dose, 1 and done vaccines to all of our planned second dose Pfizer clinics. So we have one today from 4:30 to 7, walk-in or appointment is available. We have Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer, so eligible for ages 12 and older. And we have one tomorrow from 8:15 to 4:45. As the health department has shifted from holding large mass vaccine clinics to small neighborhood clinics, there's been a lot of interest from various community organizations in helping to facilitate COVID vaccination in places that people trust and feel comfortable with. So one of the first in Ottawa County to offer this vaccine to 12 and older was Intersection Ministries in Holland, and it was a great success, followed shortly by Hope Church in Grand Haven. Today, there are clinics at St. Patrick, St. Anthony Church in Grand Haven and Resurrection Life Church in Holland. So in addition, hospitals, pharmacies, urgent care centers are all offering this. And if you have internet access, a good one-stop shop to find vaccine clinics is to go to vaccinatewestmi.com/clinics. There's a new calendar feature. You can use your calendar to figure out what day you're available. Click on that day on their calendar. It will show you all the vaccine clinics that are available in this whole West Michigan area. Some other news just in the last couple of days, which is going to help our vaccination efforts. We got some good news about Pfizer. And like I said, that's the only vaccine authorized for people younger than 18. Typically, this vaccine requires an ultra cold freezer, which is an expense. So that makes it not very practical for small organizations. New guidance just released now allows Pfizer to be stored for up to 30 days in a refrigerator. So we are now getting a lot of interest from doctors' offices asking us to share our Pfizer with them, which we are. And just in the first week, they've already told us that a lot of 12 to 15-year-olds have been getting their COVID shots when they come in for an office visit, and it was a lot more uptake than they anticipated. So that's encouraging. You may have heard in the news about cases of myocarditis being reported after COVID-19 vaccination. And I'd like to kind of finish what I have to share with you today, talking about COVID-19 safety and vaccine safety. On May 17, the CDC COVID-19 VAST, which stands for Vaccine Safety Technical Work Group, reviewed reports of myocarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart. And they saw this following vaccination with Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. Now, myocarditis is also a known consequence of COVID-19 illness. Over 270 million doses of Pfizer and Moderna vaccines have been administered in just the United States. And this is what we know so far about the situation. It's happening predominantly in adolescents and young adults, more often in males than females, more often seen following dose 2, and typically seen within 4 days after vaccination. Most of these cases have been mild so far, and follow-up of the cases is ongoing. So as they monitor this, they are making the public and providers aware so they know what to look for. But at this time, in the CDC's monitoring systems for this vaccine, the baseline rates for this are what would be expected to happen in the normal population. So right now, there's no causal link, but they want to keep watching it. And I think just like what we had happen a little bit ago about Johnson & Johnson vaccine, when it was briefly paused due to a blood clot syndrome, which was very rare, they did declare a possible causal link that they're still investigating. This should encourage us that those reports that are made are looked at and watched, and we are taking very seriously the safety of this vaccine. So while these reports can concern people who are both vaccinated and unvaccinated, I'd like to take a few minutes to compare and contrast the safety of the illness versus the vaccine. So the US has had 33 million cases of COVID-19 illness. And with that, 587,000 fatalities. In addition, many cases of all ages have had severe illness requiring hospitalization. Now, we have a new term that is developed. It's called post-COVID conditions. It's an umbrella term for a wide range of health consequences that are either still present or that appear about 4 weeks or longer after infection with SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. There's still a lot yet to learn, and we don't have a good grasp on the burden of this in our population. But one recent study estimates that 35% to 50% of non-hospitalized cases, not counting the hospitalized ones, continue to have symptoms months after their infection. They are now studying 3 categories of post-COVID conditions, that umbrella term. And I'd like to just run quickly what those are. There's one, what they call multi-organ effects, where COVID-19 has been documented with effects in most, if not all, body systems. So the heart and circulatory system, the lungs, the kidneys, the skin, the brain and neurological system, and also psychiatric issues resulting from infection. Multi-system inflammatory system, or in syndrome, in children and adults, and autoimmune conditions are also occurring after COVID-19. It's unknown how long these multi-organ system effects will last and whether or not they will become chronic health conditions. So that's one result of COVID-19 illness. Post-COVID-19 conditions also include the effects of hospitalization or treatment for COVID-19. So people are having ongoing tracheal problems from being on a ventilator, severe weakness and deconditioning with prolonged hospitalization, and are being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder following their ICU or life-threatening experience with COVID-19. Long COVID, you may have heard about that, is a new term adopted to encompass a wide range of symptoms and clinical findings that occur in people with varying degrees of COVID-19 illness, including patients that had mild or no symptoms. The symptoms can be fatigue, difficulty thinking, cough, chest pain, mental health symptoms such as depression and anxiety, endocrine system conditions, et cetera, loss of taste or smell that continues for a long time. So saying all of this, achieving herd immunity through COVID-19 illness is a dangerous proposition for a population and not something that public health advocates. By contrast to that 33 million COVID cases, we've had 287 million doses of vaccine given, 8 times the amount. We have 587,000 deaths alone. And we have been hearing from people who are not getting a vaccine because they've heard that there's a high number of vaccine-related deaths. So from mid-December, when the vaccine came out publicly, to May 17, The CDC's Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, or VAERS, has reported a total of 4,647 deaths that were reported to that system following vaccination. CDC and FDA physicians review every one of these and access the medical records for each case. A review of the clinical information, the death certificate, the autopsy, and all the medical records so far has not established a cause and effect link to COVID-19 vaccines. However, recent reports do indicate a plausible causal relationship between the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and 28 cases of a rare and serious adverse event, blood clots, which has caused 3 known deaths among the 10 million who received that vaccine. So if all of those deaths, those 4,600 some deaths were actually vaccine related, which there is no known link at this time, that is still a tiny fraction, 0.0017% of the hundreds of millions of doses compared to the deaths from COVID-19 illness. So the real life evidence is compelling that COVID-19 vaccination outweighs the risks of vaccination, as well as the risks associated with being unprotected from COVID-19 illness. So while the health department deeply respects everyone's choice, and we understand that there are many good reasons why someone may hesitate to get a COVID-19 vaccine, we urge you to talk to your doctor about this decision. For our children and our medically vulnerable neighbors who don't have a choice right now to get vaccinated, please consider calling your doctor and talking with them about this decision. We'd like to add Michigan to the list of 9 states that have reached 70% of their eligible population vaccinated with at least 1 dose, and they're ready to safely hit that July 1 mark when restrictions are lifted. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcia. Hold on just a minute. There might be some questions. Is there any questions?
I've got a question,
Okay.
if I may. Could you set us straight a little bit of the mask situation for our
Yes.
school kids? I mean, we've only got a week or 2, maybe 3 left for this season. So for the rest of this year, everybody has to continue to wear masks.
So the situation was kind of difficult because there was those MIOSHA things for the school employees and then different rules for the children. Now, masking is still required for anyone who's unvaccinated. At this point, there would be no children under 16 who would be considered fully vaccinated, and they won't make it by the end of the school year. So for sure, everyone under that age has to still have masks on. For the 16, 17, and 18-year-olds, there would be a small number that could be considered fully vaccinated. Probably just in the last several days, they've hit that mark for the 16 and 17-year-olds. There could be more 18-year-olds. Many schools have decided, for lots of good reasons, one being kind of equity in their building, to continue masking among employees and students until the end of the year and not cause that disruption. But they do have that option.
What is fall going to look like for our students?
So, yeah, well, that's a really great question. And I would like to be able to give you a really concrete answer. We're having the same questions. Last fall didn't look good. This fall, we have vaccination and we have the summer to make that happen. Right now, we only have the option to in 12 and older. So that leaves a big group that will be unprotected. We do expect, Pfizer has applied to the FDA for full approval of their vaccine. That could happen during the summer. And they've also are getting ready to apply for younger ages to receive emergency use authorization. So in the fall, we could possibly start vaccinating kids younger than 12. All of that will make a difference in what happens to us when we go indoors, when we start up sports, when we go back to school, when we have holiday gatherings that are inside, and not have a surge, especially as all of our restrictions are lifted. So it's going to be all up to us to prove what we've been saying, that if you give us the education, we can make good decisions and we can do the right thing.
And one follow-up, if I may, my last question, if I
please.
may, I'll be brief. These mandates for masks and students, what have you, these are Lansing mandates. These are not Ottawa County Health Department mandates.
You're correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Marcia, are those Lansing mandates, or are they CDC mandates? And are they mandates or are they guidelines?
Okay, very good question. The CDC issued guidance and recommendations, and the next day, MDHHS issued new orders. So they are right now orders,
Okay.
but they will lift July 1.
Yep.
So there will be no
More of a
more. orders.
comment than a question. When we started, when this whole process started back in January, February, or March of last year, a lot of us ordered a book on the 1918 influenza time. And I would imagine that the past year and X months have been a learning process, not just for Ottawa County, but the health department at the state level and even at the CDC level as well. And I would imagine that we've learned a lot more faster than we did in 1918.
Yeah.
And I imagine that in that learning that we've also learned a lot of things that we were possibly correct in implementing, and there were things that possibly we might have missed a little bit, but when we missed in line of trying to protect our folks. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Yes, I think that would be an accurate statement. I would rather take the fall for having overreacted and been too conservative than underreacted and having people die unnecessarily.
Thank you.
Kyle?
I just have a quick question. I'm on the CDC website right now. From 0 to 17 ages, there was only 295 deaths so far from COVID. What would be the push to get the younger kids vaccinated if the grandparents in the 65 plus is already? But it's just, why is that coming from DC or what? Why?
I can give you a few reasons
Okay.
why I would be recommending that. Number one, we don't have a fully vaccinated older population or adult population at all. We're about 50%, which is really good. Children are definitely vectors of this. They do pass this on and do transmit it. We are grateful, beyond grateful, that we have had a low number of deaths. But we continue to have an average of about 10 children at Helen DeVos Children's Hospital with COVID-19. Their parents don't think this is a little thing, and they haven't had the opportunity to vaccinate them. Some of them, not many, have died. What we can't quantify right now is what they're living with, how well they're recovering. I have no idea, a lot of us have no idea of what COVID is going to look like going out 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. Again, I would rather, as the official responsible for the health of the public and charged with that duty, overreact some than underreact and have people suffer with lifelong illness that we aren't even aware of yet. That would be some of the reasons.
And then I just got one more. I know Michigan's the only state that's requiring testing for the athletes. Is that something that they're going to carry over into the fall?
I have
Or you just-
no information about that.
Okay.
It's a really good question, though, and it's a question that I have as well, Commissioner Terpstra.
All right, anyone else? No, thanks, Marcia.
Thank you very much.
All right, the next thing on our agenda is public comment. Anyone's welcome to come to the podium, give us your name and address, and you have 3 minutes. And I think Katie or John are gonna keep the time. One of you two?
Can we ask everyone as well just to write your name and address down so we have it? And you can do it after you're done. When the next person's coming up, just easier for us for minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you're on.
Hi, my name is Laura. I live at 302 North Division Street in Spring Lake. I have
We need your full name too.
Laura Trotter. I have a sweet little 6-year-old boy who attends Holmes Elementary School. He came to us as a sweet little foster baby at 9 months old. He was severely neglected mentally and physically. I had vowed that day to always protect him and never have anyone harm him again. He has disorders from this neglect. One of them is apraxia of speech, and that is where his brain knows what it wants to say, but when it comes out all wrong, and there's no cure. The only thing that he can do is right now, which he has been in since he was 3 years old, is intensive speech therapy. He receives at Generation Care in Grand Haven, as well as within the school he attends. We have done that religiously. The masks this past year, and I understand the importance of them. I do. This has been horrible, horrible year for everybody. But this past year, the masks have made it very hard for him to progress in his speech, as he needs to work so much harder with his lips, his mouth, and his jaw to pronounce the words and articulation. And I feel as if I have let him down by having him have to wear those masks. I feel I should have homeschooled him. I asked him last night if he would like to go back to school in the fall. And he may have to wear masks. And he said no, he would rather me teach him at home. And then this was the very first time I had ever heard him talk in his sweet little life about his speech disorder. He said, "Mom, I talk different than everybody else." I had dreaded this day. I'm still not quite sure how to handle it. But this fall, if masks are going to be required, I will be homeschooling him, as his future mental and physical health literally depend on having his mouth free. Thank you so much, guys, and God bless you all.
Thanks, Laura.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jonas Walters, and I live at 8835 Cavalier Court in Jenison. My husband and I have 2 boys graduating this year from Jenison High School, and 2 little girls ages 5 and 7 who also attend Jenison Public Schools. What a beautiful day it is today in Michigan. It's sunny, it's hot, it's 82 degrees. Michigan perfection, some would say. Thank goodness for this comfortable, air-conditioned building that we have to hold this meeting in today. I would imagine that there are no complaints from our commissioners, from our health department staff, or anyone in attendance when it comes to having these creature comforts on days like today. My 7-year-old, on the other hand, today she sits with her classmates and her teacher in a hot, muggy classroom with masks on. Most of last evening, after returning home from my son's doubleheader, my 7-year-old daughter complained of a migraine from the heat. This was simply from just being outside for a few hours watching her brother play baseball. Back to school she went today, a place that we as parents have always taken comfort in as a safe place for our children. But is it? My 7-year-old has fallen behind in both math and reading this year. The joy she once had for school has diminished this year. She works routinely and diligently with an interventionist, but it was still recommended that she attend the Summer Matters program this summer for 4 weeks. So I reluctantly signed her up. When did it become okay for parents to have to choose between their child's education or their health and safety? As I have been struggling with the thought of my daughter being behind in school if I don't make her go this summer, I stumbled across some advice shared by Phyllis Fagal, a licensed clinical professional counselor and certified professional school counselor. She shared, at a recent talk, a parent asked what their kids should do this summer to make up for a year of academic disruption. The answer, get outside, play with friends, hug grandparents, read for fun, ride a bike. If we don't let kids recalibrate, they may struggle to re-engage in learning. Making children bear the burden of our fight against COVID would be bad enough were they a major vector of spread, but they are not a major vector of spread and children are not at great risk. We need to stop subjecting them to paying the highest price for our fears. Take the masks off of our children in schools, stop testing our healthy athletes, stop pushing a vaccine through bribery and coercion, and let parents get back to parenting. This means putting the choice back in our hands, one of which the health department staff that was just here said, the health department deeply respects our choice. Some will still choose to mask, and that is okay. Some will choose the vaccine, and I respect that that is what they feel is best for them. My point, though, is let us choose and stop making our children suffer so that we may feel more at ease. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lori Burks. I've got 3 boys, ages 14 and twins that are 12. They all go to Jenison Public Schools. And I'm sure all of you feel this way about your position that you hold, that you did not ever decide to be in the position to make the decisions that you're making. And I too did not know what I signed up for when I became a parent, and now need to fight for my child to be able to breathe freely. Now, I think if all of you really enjoyed wearing the mask and felt like you could breathe fine with it, you'd have it on right now. So I think that's a sign that we all prefer not to be wearing them, but even more so children. And one thing that, so our children being really our most treasured and valuable thing that God has given us. We feel a responsibility as parents to make the best decision for them. There is a responsibility there to make decisions for them that sometimes are contrary to what public authorities might suggest. Initially, I mean, I haven't been anti-vaccine in the past at all. But one thing I've had to realize through this pandemic, I've had to go from a place of total fear when this started. And then I started to realize that, you know what, I need to do my own research and not just fully trust mainstream media, not just fully trust the CDC. I want to be able to trust our doctors and the NIH and Fauci, who's the one telling us to do all these things. But I came to the point where I knew I needed to do my own research. And at this point, there's information out there. I do not need to be a doctor to understand some of the things that are going on right now. I can read what other doctors are saying, like the doctors that are saying that masks do not work. In fact, it's actually more unhealthy to have a mask on than to have a mask on than to not wear a mask. You can look at a picture of a guy that did drywalling with a surgical mask. He takes it off and all the surgical particles are accumulated below his nose. Those particles from drywalling are 100 times larger than than this virus. I think it's, a matter of common sense and wisdom just to do our own research and come to our own conclusions regarding that, and also to take a personal responsibility of the fear that we may be feeling, because I believe that just making a decision based on fear is poor leadership. And we have access to, and thank you for praying at the beginning of this meeting, but if we know Jesus, we have an access to
That's your 3 minutes. I'm
freedom
sorry.
from fear.
Thank
So
you.
I encourage you all to make a decision based on faith and not fear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stacy Perkins. I live at 7504 Augusta Lane in Hudsonville. I have an 8-year-old daughter in Jenison schools. And I know when this pandemic started, there was a lot we didn't know. And we've got some time under our belts now that we can learn from the data out there. First off, I brought some articles with me. This particular one says that the holes in the vents of masks are 1,000 times bigger than a virus particle. I've read other articles that say 400 times. But I find it far more interesting to look at comparative data. When you look at Michigan compared to South Dakota, where they weren't masking or closing things down, we fared far worse than they did. I have an article here with me that talks about every time mask mandates are implemented, they have the numbers here, 9 million some cases with mask mandates, 5 million some cases without mask mandates, and it works out to be 10 less per day per 100,000 people where they weren't wearing masks. So we can look at that comparative data and say, well, maybe the masks were making things worse, maybe not, but they certainly are not making it better. And I really like looking at the study done in Sweden. 1.95 million children, all in schools, no shutdowns, no masks, no social distancing. And there were absolutely 0 COVID deaths in that time when they were doing the study. So I have to ask, is what we're doing sensible? Is it really helping our kids? I also want to talk a little bit about the harm that, again, I'm taking this right from a research article from PhD. When you wear a mask, you get less oxygen and you breathe in more CO2. And that is known to disrupt brain function, cardiopulmonary function, neurological function, vascular function, endocrine system, and the immune system, and can even increase your risk of initiating cancer by having lower levels of oxygen in your body. So I have to ask, if we have 1.95 million children not wearing masks with 0 COVID deaths, why would we want to risk harming them by forcing them to wear masks in school all day? Other harm that can be caused is bacteria and germs get trapped inside the mask so that children are rebreathing that all day. And we all know how great kids are with hygiene, which would increase germs and bacteria in that area. And the increased temperature and humidity in a mask can also cause toxic particles from the mask to be released for the kids to breathe in. And then there's the psychological elements, which we've heard other parents testify to today. You don't see face recognition. And when we're learning concepts like speech and reading, it is important to see the face and the mouth and to build relationships and connections for these kids. I realize that it is not always within your power. We have mandates from Lansing, but when it is, I certainly do request that you would consider this information and unmask our kids in the fall. And I'd be happy to leave these articles if anyone would like to look at them.
Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Angela Loreth. I live at 10950 Jordan Court in Allendale. I ask you to pass the following resolution to end enforcement of the COVID-19 orders and restore constitutional freedoms to Ottawa County. Whereas the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners swore an oath to uphold the constitutions of the United States and the state of Michigan, which protect our rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and further preserve the rights of parents to determine the care of their children. The Constitution also guarantees freedom of religion, speech, and assembly, as well as due process of law. Constitutional freedoms are not suspended in times of crisis. Although the threat of the COVID-19 virus is serious, civil liberties are not contingent on public health crises. We recognize that Title 18 U.S.C. Section 242 states, whoever, under color of any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, or custom, willfully subjects any person in any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured or protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States shall be fined under this title or imprisoned no more than 1 year or both. On March 10, 2020, Governor Whitmer declared a state of emergency and subsequently issued nearly 200 executive orders, closing public and parochial schools, depriving citizens of non-essential medical and dental procedures, prohibiting assembly in public places and private residences, prohibiting citizens' movement, including travel between their own residences, instituting contact tracing and quarantines, closing non-essential businesses, even prohibiting outdoor work deemed non-essential, reopening select businesses with restrictions, restricting purchase of seeds and other non-essential goods, restricting the use of motorized boats, and requiring the wearing of masks. After the Michigan Supreme Court ruled that her actions were unconstitutional, similar orders were and continued to be issued through her administrative branch via the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, including masking children and toddlers as young as 2 years of age, coerced medical procedures in the form of forced COVID-19 testing of student athletes, and quarantine of healthy students without due process. Most recently, Governor Whitmer has stated that freedom from such orders may possibly come when a large percentage of the Michigan population undergo a medical procedure which has only been given emergency use authorization.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tanya Harris. I live at 11420 Prairie, Allendale. I'm going to continue the requested resolution. Whereas The initial purpose, as stated in Executive Order 2020-05 on March 13, 2020, was to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 and to provide essential protections to vulnerable Michiganders and this state's healthcare system and other critical infrastructure, and noted there is currently no approved vaccine or antiviral treatment for this disease. Much was unknown at this time. These orders of the governor and the MDHHS stripped citizens of personal choice and eroded the constitutional rights and freedoms of citizens and parents, resulting in undue burden, restrictions, and irreparable harm to citizens, local businesses, and employees, loss of student education and social emotional development, and increased mental health and suicide risk of the youth of Ottawa County. Differing opinions on the path to be taken in response to COVID-19 should be robustly debated and chosen by legislatures that have been elected by the people. Governor Whitmer and state agencies do not have that authority to unilaterally impose orders that essentially equate into laws. Ottawa County recognizes the heroic efforts of frontline workers, citizens, and businesses who have diligently worked to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. It does not dismiss the seriousness of the COVID-19 to citizens and vulnerable demographics and appreciates the need for appropriate policies to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 virus, while protecting the constitutional rights of individuals and local and state economic interests. 1 year following the arrival of COVID-19 in the state of Michigan, Ottawa County finds 80.3% of deaths occurred in 9.8% of the population, which was ages 70 and up, and 91.8% of the deaths occurred in ages 60 plus. The average age of death in Ottawa County is 79.2 years old, and the median age of death was 81. With the average life expectancy in the United States being 78.7 years. The age summary for deaths categorized in COVID-19 in Ottawa County was as follows. Ages 0 to 9, 0 deaths. 10 to 19, 0 deaths. 20 to 29, 2. 30 to 39, 4. 40 to 49, 6. 50 to 59, 21. 60 to 69, 46. 70 to 79, 102, 80 plus years, 220.
Thanks, Nadia.
My name is Amber Shashelski. I live at 6524 Elwood Court in Allendale. I'm continuing with a resolution with findings 1 year later. Whereas we mourn those that we have lost in Ottawa County, we also grieve those living in nursing homes and staying in the hospitals that have been deprived of contact with loved ones in the last year. At the same time that state policy placed COVID-19 positive patients in nursing homes where the most vulnerable population resides. Measured, reasonable actions can be used to protect the elderly in residential care while allowing them to see their loved ones. Older, high-risk adults still have the right to determine what is best for their own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, including personal health measures. Younger members of our county are not at significant risk from the COVID-19 virus, with 0 deaths from age 0 to 19 and a recovery rate of over 99% through age 59, which represents over 80% of our county population. Mandated measures of masking children as young as 2 years of age, coerced testing of teen athletes, and quarantining students with negligible illness surfacing have negatively affected socio-emotional development and education and deprived our children of positive activities and once-in-a-lifetime events. The risk of anxiety, depression, and death from suicide has increased and is now a greater risk to our youth than COVID-19, a mental health crisis which must be weighed. Our area hospitals are not filled with youth with COVID-19. It's rather filled with youth on suicide watch, as we see that our local inpatient mental health facilities are filled to capacity. We now have safe and effective therapeutics proven to save lives. Our hospitals are well equipped. They are not overwhelmed. Ottawa County's death rate continues to be low, hospital beds and ventilators continue to be available, and vaccines are now available to anyone who desires them, with over 73% of our most vulnerable residents, ages 65 and up, having completed the COVID-19 vaccination. Michigan has not seen better viral control and outcomes than states which allowed for personal choice on health measures. COVID-19 may continue to pose health risks for an extended period of time, but stripping constitutionally protected freedoms by means of orders for the sake of medically vulnerable is just not sustainable in a society. MDHHS and the local health department appear to have quarantined healthy students without legal authority or providing due process to citizens. MDHHS orders give health departments and local sheriff departments authority to enforce the orders, but do not require enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Sylvia Rohde. I live at 12482 60th Avenue. Concluding the resolution to restore freedom. Therefore, be it resolved, the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners will no longer support unconstitutional orders unilaterally imposed by Governor Whitmer and state agencies regarding COVID-19 without the authority of law. Constitutional freedoms are not to be suspended in times of crisis. We direct the county administrator to notify department heads that no funds or resources are to be expended for enforcement or pressured compliance to any orders regarding COVID-19, to include license reporting or barring access to schools, churches, businesses, and operations that fail to comply with such orders. We direct no funds for the arrest and prosecution of any person accused of violating emergency orders regarding COVID-19. We encourage the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department and the Prosecutor's Office to uphold their oaths of office to support the Constitution and make this the lowest priority. We trust the citizens of Ottawa County to act responsibly towards others while determining what is best for themselves and their families and contending with risks associated with COVID-19. Measured, reasonable actions are encouraged to protect the elderly in residential care while allowing for contact with loved ones. We encourage churches, public and private schools, and local businesses to use their own good judgment to operate in a manner which minimizes risk to citizens while protecting the health and welfare of their businesses, care for their employees, and the community. Information regarding COVID-19 statistics, risks, and resources will remain on the Ottawa County website as a resource for residents. The county will continue to provide COVID-19 vaccines and testing for those who desire them. As all medical procedures carry risk, opening our county fully is not dependent on residents choosing to be vaccinated or tested. Ottawa County will not support the use of vaccine passports or differing treatment of unvaccinated individuals in schools, businesses, and public places. On behalf of the citizens of Ottawa County, we call on Governor Whitmer, MDHHS, and MIOSHA to immediately end all orders and restrictions related to COVID-19 and cease from issuing more in the future. We request the Michigan Legislature adopt constitutionally sound measures which limit the unchecked exercise and abuse of executive power and administrative agencies, and which restore individual responsibility and freedom, not dependent on public health data. We request a copy of this resolution be sent to Governor Whitmer and our elected officials in Michigan. We would like to leave you a copy of the resolution. Thank you for your consideration.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Kasnowitz. I live at 11485 Cleveland Street in Unica. I have 2 kids in the Spring Lake school system currently. I would have had a third, but he was denied access to preschool because he could not tolerate wearing a mask. So when my boys were forced to do virtual learning at home, there was pretty much daily tears for my 7-year-old. And watching my son, who's normally so excited to go to school and excels in everything daily, he was stuck in front of a screen and struggled, just so heartbreaking as a parent. My 10-year-old could cope better with the virtual learning, but it was far from great. He, however, really struggled with wearing his mask. It substantially increased his headaches. He gets them occasionally, but he had them almost constantly. We changed his diet, we increased his water, we increased his sleep. It didn't matter. The negative effects of the mask on my oldest son were terrible. He wanted to be in person so badly that he just decided to deal with it. The fact that there are so many kids out there right now being stuck dealing with the side effects from these masks is ridiculous. Young children learn about compassion and communication through their facial expressions of others, and they are currently being deprived of that. These masks are causing severe social and emotional development problems in our youth. While we learned there are 0 deaths in kids ages 0 to 19 from COVID in Ottawa County, our suicide rate has continued to rise. There's currently over a 2-week waiting list for kids trying to get into any local psychiatric facility. That's terrifying. We don't have weeks to wait when suicide is a problem. In the beginning, this virus was scary. We all know it was, and we didn't know what it was when we started. Now, I am an ICURN, and so I've been on the front lines, seeing firsthand the progression from where we were in the beginning to where we are now. We now have therapeutics, and we have a vaccine for those who wish to take it. Our hospitals aren't full of kids sick with COVID. Instead, they have lots of kids on suicide watch from being isolated, masked, and made to feel like they were going to kill grandma and grandpa if they got too close. How sad is that? Imagine if you were a kid and you were told to stay away from others because breathing on them might kill them. That mental strain is just too much for a child. We continue to weaken their immune systems by not letting them have natural exposure to germs. Our immune system needs practice, good sleep, and a healthy diet to stay strong. So if we continue to mask and isolate them, we are only weakening their immune system further and not giving their body a chance to do what it is designed to do. The schools should be teaching about how to build healthy immune systems and not how to hide from a virus with a 99% survival rate. As far as the vaccine goes, we all know that it was made clear it's for emergency use authorization only and is not FDA approved. They're two very different things if you take the time to look it up. For parents who choose to vaccinate their children, that is their choice. For those of us who don't, that is our choice. Our children in no way should ever be coerced into taking the vaccine, either by their school or other health officials, or made to feel bad for not getting it. It's happening in other schools in Michigan right now, maybe not locally in our area at this point, but we need to make sure that it doesn't happen because our kids deserve better than this. Please give us the chance
That's your
to
time.
choose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Krista Yetzke, 9509 Fast Drive in Allendale. Up until last year, I'd always put blind faith into those I'd elected. But when mandates began happening and leaders I'd blindly followed began making rules that didn't make sense, I had to step back and begin to do my own research. I've learned more this year than I ever have about the Constitution, citizens' rights, and the beauty of how God created our body's immune systems. I've come to realize I can't blindly follow anymore. No more depending on one source, person, institution, and definitely not the media for the answers. So when I watched the commissioners meeting 2 weeks ago, I listened to parents share their heart-wrenching stories with you and was deeply bothered when the severity of their pleas seemed disregarded. Rather, you appeared to rely on the county health officer for your statistics and instruction. That's how I was a year ago, only trusting a single source. That's not good enough. Are you honestly going to depend solely on one person, one department to have all the answers, especially when you have this much hurt in your county? At what point do you consider the county health officer could be wrong? The mental health and well-being of each child across your county is at stake. I ask you today to listen differently. Listen to these speeches with the heart of a dad or a grandpa, not as an elected official. These are people, real people in your county having painful experiences as a result of decisions you are making. Yes, you are choosing to listen to only one source, the county health department. When you have all this data before you, parents are bringing you science from immunologists, virologists, PPE experts, research you should be gathering yourselves. Parents are also listening to the VAERS report. In these reports are documented cases of children dying from the vaccine, not from COVID, from the vaccine. This isn't about how to make the vaccine more convenient. And besides, it's not even a vaccine. It's an experimental biologic agent with side effects that include the potential to make our children infertile. Other side effects are blood clots, which can and have led to death. And I'm going to say it again, children have died from this experimental
injection. My cousin, he got the shot and now has been in the hospital for the last month with blood clots, a collapsed lung, and he's on a ventilator. This experimental drug is not FDA approved, and those trying to share the truth and speak out against it are being censored. My own doctor has been censored. This is politics creeping into our classrooms. The answer here is not the injections. The answer is in listening to these parents who are in the trenches, recognize that we can make our own healthcare choices as we've always done. That is your answer. Your job is to oversee the running of our schools, not to make our healthcare choices, and certainly not to politicize or indoctrinate them. Please just listen differently.
Thanks, Chris.
Hi, my name is Angie Yetzke, and I am from Ottawa County, Jenison School District. If you truly care about the safety of our children, you keep hearing that word safety, safety, I ask you to listen to these parents. The COVID-19 recovery rate for people under 20 years old is 99.997%. If you were not aware of that fact before today, I question the depth of your research. Maybe you also have not heard that there are safe, available, and effective treatments that have saved thousands of lives when given early. Hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin are two such treatments. Not surprising if you also didn't know, vaccines cannot be approved by the FDA if there is available treatment. That is why so many doctors and researchers have been censored. Our friends from the health department, she mentioned these 4,000 deaths. When I looked it up today, as of May 14, it showed 4,201. She talked about 46. That must have been just in the last week and a half that jumped another couple hundred. Do you know that 99% of vaccine-related events go unreported? That makes the death toll more like 400,000, but you won't hear about that on the news. These VAERS numbers include children. I read about 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds dying of blood clots. Your irrational fear and overstepping into the lives of our children will cause harm. Then there is the constant testing. These testing swabs contain something called ethylene oxide, a carcinogen known to damage the brain and nervous system and cause a huge array of issues from headaches and diarrhea to various types of cancer. And yet these swabs are repeatedly forced upon our children. And for what? They have a false positive rate of about 90%. Incentivizing for vaccination has already begun. Administrators, teachers, and school nurses are offering everything from free ice cream to free prom attendance in Michigan if you get the shot. Children are notorious for not seeing the bigger picture. With all the propaganda and carrot dangling, soon they will start begging to be vaccinated, not only to be given back their constitutional right to breathe by being freed by the masks, but to escape the bullying, the pressure, the excessive testing, and the second-class status they are already receiving. As parents, we feel desperate to protect our children's physical and emotional well-being, present and future. I say future because if you didn't know, children were not included in the trials for this experimental non-FDA approved injection, also known as the vaccine. So that means all those getting the shot, they are the trials. Do they know that? Has anyone bothered to tell them? Our friends from the health department, she was so worried about right now and about future results of COVID. What about future results of the vaccine? If you care about our children, you must dive deeper into your research. We all have resources. It's time to focus on education, stop testing, stop requiring masks, stop pushing the vaccine, stop threatening the safety of our children.
Thanks, Angie.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ronnie Allen. I live at 11024 Timberline in Allendale. Thank you for listening. You are probably aware of recent school board meetings being inundated by parents whose patience has run out. People who were once compliant with their leaders and the directives stemming from the science are now tired of the control. The recommendations have had us on a roller coaster. We are numb to the latest press conferences. In hindsight, Michigan has been on a course of switchback policies. Even when we have been given our freedoms back, there's no telling how long it will last. Freedom has been redefined in terms of what we are granted rather than our rights. Well, we, the people of Ottawa County and the state of Michigan, are done having leaders who follow along rather than do their constitutional job to protect the constituents' individual freedoms. And we're done watching our children, our schools, and our society be led down this slope of demise. Our students have been through shutdowns, quarantines, remote learning, and suspensions for mask violations. They have suffered the loss of even the normal things of childhood, things we took for granted as kids. And the developmentally challenged have missed out on critical therapies that require interaction with their therapist. Faces are integral. Both the healthy and the physically challenged have struggled to either make it through long days masked or forced to learn remotely. And for many, this means that learning was halted. Please consider the long-term effect of these policies on everyone. The policies have not reduced COVID deaths in this age group, but that has not stopped the agenda of fear. Research from last summer showed that asymptomatic spread is very minimal, yet it is still used as propaganda for fear. We heard that today. As a result, large numbers of healthy kids have been shut in their homes for weeks at a time, many repeatedly. We cannot continue to follow the science that allowed this. Instead of suffering from COVID, our kids are suffering far worse consequences. They're losing their will, their joy, and their hope. While the world around them has been out of control, they have also lost much of the structure in their own personal lives. It is no surprise that there is a lack of solid data from our health departments about this. However, the anecdotal evidence is pretty damning. Mental illness and hospitalizations, medication overdoses, and suicides of our children and their friends this year have been on the rise. The mask policy remains in schools, and that's not okay. Nor is the coercion of kids to take the injections that are being pushed as a vaccine. In addition to tax-funded pressure, there's also pressure from their teachers and classmates who are guilt-tripping them. The dichotomous rules we just heard earlier are only further increasing this discrimination. This coercion of our children is absolutely irresponsible and reprehensible. These executive powers will continue to be used until there is legal pushback. The cards are on the table. We know how our governor does not believe in the science, as was seen by her hypocrisy in violating her own mask mandates and travel recommendations this past weekend and month. We will not stop resisting this. Please push back against our governor and protect our freedoms by limiting the health department and the MDHHS from further enforcement of any of these mandates, specifically in schools. The madness needs to end now.
It's Harvey Nickel. I live at 7513 23rd Avenue in Jenison. I am a retired biochemistry teacher from Grand Valley. I taught for 45 years, and I've just retired a couple of years ago in this midst of this chaos. Some wonderful comments being brought, and my comment is follow the science, because it has not been followed by those who we expected to be leaders. Elected and non-elected, they are not following any science. The masks are totally ineffective. There's absolutely no scientific evidence that shows a mask is effective against a virus. It's like using a chain link fence to stop a mosquito. The analogy is perfect. If you look at what the virologists use in the laboratories for pathogens of viruses, they use full body suits, external oxygen tanks. That's type 1 for pathogens. They did not use that in Wuhan. They used type 2, which is sort of like a dentist, and that's why it escaped. This has been a terrible situation. The virus is real. The pandemic has been put up on us by the media, by massaging the statistics. Do you realize in 2020, there were fewer deaths of overall in this country than in 2019? If that had been a pandemic, there'd be a lot more deaths. Actually, more deaths in 2018 than was in 2020. Also, the death rate is, like I said, 99.9% and plus for younger people. My age is 95 and plus. Now, it'll be 99.9 if the government would allow hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin to be used. You cannot get it in Michigan. There's something wrong here. Something's very wrong. Follow the science. There is a lot of evidence that shows that the masks are harming, especially children. They are so correct, they get their immune system. You fight this virus with the immune system. The masks are shutting down the immune system. They're doing the very things that would be beneficial, keeping you out of the sunlight, breathing your own air, etc. This, what the women have said here, I had some notes. I'm not even going to look at them because they've covered the topics, but just follow the science. Our government is not. You have the ability constitutionally to fight back, and that's where it has to start, at the ground level. We can't expect them to do it because they have some kind of agenda I have not figured out yet. In my mind, it's evil. We are dealing with a pandemic that has been put on us by the mainstream media and the big tech. You mentioned the word ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. It'll be shut down from YouTube immediately. I posted hydroxychloroquine on the YouTube. It lasted 6 hours last year when the American Frontline Doctors had their posts. So follow the sun.
Who's next?
Pretty much said everything I'd like to say too. My name is Chris Butkus, and my husband and I have 4 grandkids that go to Allendale Public Schools. We also are against all the mask mandates and all the other mandates that have been put upon these kids for over a year now. First year or the first month did all the safety protocols. After a month, we were like, we're not going to do this anymore. We've been about our grandkids the whole rest of the time. We take our vitamin D, our vitamin C, our zinc and magnesium, and we wash our hands, and we've never been sick. So we are the older generation. And what I think that these kids should not have any extra worry about making other people sick. I mean, we are the older generation. You and all these adults here, we need to protect ourselves and not depend on the kids to protect us. Yes. And now there's pressure for them to agree to take an experimental shot to protect others. And if you do your research, like everyone has said, this so-called vaccine is definitely causing more harm than this flu-like virus. And it will continue to cause health problems in the future because of some of the harmful ingredients that are in it. Most of us know that it's a lie when they say it's safe and FDA approved. So this fall, the control and any discrimination against the kids for their choice not to wear a mask, not to be tested, or not to get the shot shall not be tolerated. And I do want to say that the health department can talk on and on and on and on. And you know how hard it is for these people to limit their speeches to 3 minutes. We could go on and on and on too. Thank you.
My name is Emily Underhill, and I am at 11680 Brookridge Drive in Allendale. If we could go back 15 months ago to March of 2020, you would not recognize me as the same person standing up here speaking today. At that time, I was a mom who was scared. I was scared for my 5-year-old son's life. You see, for years, my son has had respiratory issues that resulted in permanent scarring of his lungs. We practically lived in the emergency room, and if a virus existed, it was inevitable that he was going to catch it. The moment all of this was classified as a pandemic, it felt like my son was given a death sentence. From that point on, I was fearmongered by the mainstream and social media into thinking that I needed to follow every single protocol they were telling us to do in order for my son to dodge this bullet. Well, I bought into that false narrative, hook, line, and sinker. My trips to the grocery store were planned to the T. To avoid bringing this virus into our house, I masked up, I wore surgical gloves, I wiped every grocery item down, including my credit card, my car keys, my steering wheel, the seats, the door handles, and the bottom of my shoes. All of my now contaminated clothes were put into the washer, and I showered immediately. This is what the media was telling us to do. And being the rule followers that we are, we didn't travel, we didn't see family, we didn't see friends, we didn't even allow our kids to play outside with the neighbors. There was one moment that I will never forget, and it was watching my son stand across the street from all of his neighborhood friends. They were all giggling and playing under one of those large parachutes. He stood there motionless and stared with sadness. My son loves people, and he had desperately wanted to join them, but he couldn't because according to what we were being told, it wasn't safe. It was absolutely heartbreaking to watch. I was desperate for answers, yet even after his pulmonologist told me that this virus was not affecting children, I still couldn't shake it. What started out as a fear had turned into a phobia. This continued on, and I created tension between someone who I never argued with, my mom. Yet there we were debating each other into tears because we disagreed with what was going on. What was the difference between her and I at that time? She had already woken up and done her research. My breaking point was 6 months later when my son came up to us with his head down and said, is this coronavirus going to be here my entire life? My husband and I knew we were slowly destroying our son's mental health by following all of these unnecessary rules. That's when I started doing my research. Why weren't we masking and quarantining back in 2009 during the H1N1 pandemic when that was killing children? Why are we forcing healthy students to test, healthy athletes to test, which only drove up cases? Why is a false narrative being presented to this board that blames, shames our kids for being super spreaders? Why is it our children's responsibility to jeopardize their health by wearing these masks to protect the elderly? Why isn't the health department discussing how unhealthy, unsafe, ineffective these masks are for all of our physical, mental, and emotional health? Why does it take us parents to point out these masks are concealing our children's identities, silencing their voices, and grooming them to trust someone whose faces they can't even see? Why is the health department pushing this narrative? I ask you, do you have grandchildren? I'd love for you to support us and them. Thank you.
I don't have anything as eloquent as all these women and men. Very good job. But what I did notice staying here, I didn't know this until
Need your
last
name,
minute, and I came here to support
address,
all
please.
the moms.
Ma'am, we
Yes.
need your name and address.
I'm sorry,
please.
my name is Melissa Homewood. It's 7463 Westwood Drive.
Okay,
I just moved, so I'm pretty excited I remembered that. You know, the moms, this situation has created the moms to get up, get showered, do our hair, and get some makeup on, which is a lot. And I don't know if everybody understands that to get us moving in one place all at the same time, dressed and showered, is a huge deal. So that should not go unnoticed. Just the fact that this many moms showed up on Wash Your Hair Day is huge. The other thing I noticed is that the health department woman sat here, and the main thing that stuck with me with her is she kept saying, I would rather be this. I would rather do that. I would rather raise on the side of caution. I don't want an I from her, and I don't think any of us moms do. We want the science says. We want, this is what we found out from the science. I don't care what she thinks, and I don't care what she feels. I am a very science-driven woman, as are all of these other moms. And I don't want someone making a decision for my son and his friends and my family that, quite frankly, isn't dealing with the situations front hand that we are. I don't know, and I can't speak for her, but I don't think she has children that possibly have mental health issues. I don't know if she has children that have speech impediments that you do not see them every day struggling. When my son comes home, he rips his face off and he's like, I mean, he's 12, but even him, I mean, these kids have to play soccer with a mask on. Just from a common sense factor, is that a good idea? But I've got a health woman that she won't stand here and listen to us, but she is now feeling that she needs to make decisions for us that she feels are correct. So the next time we do this, I would hope that she actually sits here and listens to the decisions she's making and how they're affecting us. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Liz Ramey, 6567 Elwood Court, Allendale. I have two boys at Allendale Public Schools. I actually wasn't going to talk today, but after the health department, I sort of feel compelled to, because she did a really good job of pointing out that the risk of vaccine injury is quite low. However, she failed to point out that the risk of COVID death is also quite low, and the risk of vaccine injury for these kids is higher than that of death. It's 0.01 to 0.0001. So while it's low, you know, that definitely shouldn't go unnoticed. So, you know, my personal story, I have a 4-year-old. He has epilepsy, he has autism, he has a speech delay. He's 4, he's in preschool. He comes home every day, he cries. He tells me his teachers can't hear him. He gets in trouble because he tries to pull the mask down to enunciate his words when they can't hear him, which leads to him becoming labeled behavioral. Or, you know, he can't follow this, and writing an IEP goal so that he can wear his mask and listen to his teachers. And all this is just, it's a vicious circle, you know, and he's supposed to trust these people, and they're the same people that are hindering his development. He can't participate in speech therapy through masks. You know, I've asked, can we at least get the clear mask? No, we don't have any more. Or just absolutely ridiculous. My 8-year-old, he complains of headaches every day. He comes home, Mom, did you win the fight? Did you get them to let us not have to do masks anymore? I can't breathe, Mom. It's so hot in gym class. There is so much science that talks about masks being just not beneficial. I know it's been said, but there was a huge meta-analysis published on April 20th. 64 studies were conducted in this meta-analysis in the Journal of Environmental Science. So this isn't some Yahoo News article, it's legit research. And this is not the first time that masking the general public has been discussed or studied at all, ever in our history. But every single time, it has not been advised to do because the risks outweighed any potential benefit. The risk, poor speech development, increased carbon dioxide retention, triggering increased seizure threshold. My son, who has epilepsy, by me sending him to school and having him try to mask for 8 hours a day is directly causing him to have a lower seizure threshold, something that I'm desperately trying to prevent for him. My 8-year-old complaining of headaches, 72% of kids in one of these studies had headaches after just 3 hours. Horrible headaches that required medication from breathing in their own air. I mean, I know it was said with the mosquito reference, I had the reference, it's like throwing sand at a chain link fence. The masks don't necessarily prevent the virus by any means. We're doing more harm than good. So I implore you to look at the science, including all of it, and direct evidence that masks are actually harmful and not helpful, and not just cherry pick data to fit a narrative for our health department to continue this, and to sign the letter of resolution that we have put forth for you guys and fight for us at the state level. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Anyone else?
We have another
Um,
public comment at the end of the meeting.
We have it at the end. Anyone else? If not, do we have anyone on Zoom? We do?
We've got 11 right now.
We have what?
11.
Okay, all right, go ahead. John, you want to fill them in on, can you do that, Phil, or Katie? Fill them in on telling them
Got
about
it.
10 minutes or 3 minutes. Not 10 minutes.
That's okay. Terry Nguyen, we have you first. You can state your name and your address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Right, are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so Terry Nguyen, 7610 Hidden Lake Drive in Hudsonville. I want to thank all the parents that came out today. It's just been awesome listening to all of you. This is the third time I have entered into the meeting via Zoom. And I have some questions. I'm not sure the name of the person that gave the health department speech earlier, gave the progress report, but one thing, I've been on the Ottawa County website and I want to implore the commissioners, why are we not tracking reinfection rates? You know, Ottawa County could really lead this process and show what reinfection rates are, because if you look at the science, as you've been implored to do today, reinfection rate, so to describe that, that's when someone gets COVID a second time. So they test positive, they recover, and then test positive again. This is actually worldwide. The science is showing it doesn't occur. They're talking about less than a few hundred cases around the world. So what does that tell us about natural immunity? The health department focused a lot on if you get vaccinated, life goes back to normal. If your student athlete is vaccinated, life goes back to normal. What about those of us that have immunity? I am a COVID survivor. I had COVID last November. I waited 90 days afterwards because the CDC tells us that your immunity lasts 90 days. So I had my physician draw my antibodies more than 90 days after my infection. And guess what? I still have immunity. Why should anyone that's recovered from COVID be basically put in a box as unvaccinated? Because if I have natural immunity, that recent studies are showing 6, 7, 12 months where you have natural immunity against COVID, potentially lifelong immunity, why are we put in a different category? If our kids, if we're looking at prevention of illness and herd immunity, why isn't Ottawa County Health Department looking at how many kids have already recovered from COVID as natural immunity? So these are things that we could be tracking as an Ottawa County dashboard as far as what is our reinfection rate? You know, the health department person talked a lot about safety of this vaccine, but what she didn't mention at all is the number of people that are getting COVID after being fully vaccinated. So again, to define that as more than 2 weeks after their second shot, more than 2 weeks after their Johnson & Johnson shot. Recently, we had 2 people in our church fully vaccinated more than a month that got COVID. Both were hospitalized, severe COVID after vaccination. Why isn't that on our website? Doesn't that help people make a decision about whether or not this vaccine is right for them and it's safe, potentially safe for their kids? And in conclusion, I want to say that the public health representative mentioned that there were about 10 children in the hospital fighting.
Thank you. Next up, we have Sergi. Unmute yourself.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right, my name is Sergey Petrenko, and I live at 8888 Cavalier Court, Jenison, Michigan. I appreciate all the parents that showed up in person and did the presentations. I appreciate the commissioners listening to them. I would strongly urge you to listen to your constituents and people that you're supposed to represent. I don't want to take up too much time, but I wanted to share a quote from Thomas Jefferson. And the quote is, "When government fears the people, there is liberty. When the people fear the government, there's tyranny." This is not a threat. This is just a quote that I read. And that is all I have to say. Thank you.
Next up, we have Weinberg, assuming that's the last name.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh,
Yes, we can hear you.
sorry,
We
I
need
can't
your
hear you.
full name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Weinberg. I live at 11675 Brookridge Drive in Allendale. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I just want to say first, I so appreciate all your questions and your follow-up with the health department today. Keep pushing back and asking questions, and please do your own homework. There's so much research out there. Look up the studies on mask effectiveness and the mental distress rates and masks. Look at the studies on developmental delay and masks, the social impairment and masks. Please do your own homework. I've changed a lot of what I wanted to say based on what she was saying. One thing I wanted to say is that she spoke about not knowing the long-term effects of COVID. And I have to laugh because while that might be true, what about the long-term effects of these masks? What about the unknown long-term effects of this pushed, unapproved vaccination that we have no idea? I just think for such restrictive mandates that are being placed and being held for this amount of time, it's your job to be doing more research, more pushback on these decisions, and look beyond what one department is putting in front of your face. I really urge you next time you're out in public to really look at the children and their faces that you see and the smiles and voices that have been stolen for so long. These masks need to be optional for everyone, and these vaccinations need to be optional with no coercion attached. Are we really going to remain in masks and segregate this country based on medical compliance? These kids need to know that this is not normal. Please fight for these kids. Please don't do nothing today. Please take action. Sign our resolution and send it to Lansing. Let's be leaders here in Ottawa and end this madness. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Lisa.
Next up, we have Maya, I believe. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Is it Maya?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Yes, my name's Maya Hahn. I live on Corey Drive in Hudsonville. And I ask that you pass the resolution put forth to you to restore freedom here in Ottawa County. I am an autism specialist and ASHA certified speech language pathologist. I am considered an expert in child development of speech language communication, oral motor function, oral structural development, and swallowing, as well as developmentally appropriate treatment approaches and protocols. And I attest that a typically developing 2-year-old to 8-year-old child and many children with special needs would be unable to adhere to the mask mandates placed on them by the state of Michigan. And furthermore, such mandates place children at significant risk of developing long-term speech, language, communication, and swallowing deficits, as well as cause social and emotional issues that could lead to long-term negative consequences. Furthermore, these mask mandates place severe burdens on educational and childcare institutions. The impact mask mandates have on our children and our pediatric special needs populations is enormous, setting our children up for speech and language developmental delays and disorders, social emotional consequences, and longer recovery and treatments with potentially lifetime loss of better outcomes. In special education, research is clear that early and appropriate interventions offer children with special needs best treatment outcomes. We know the speech and language window in early childhood is small, which is why we in the field of child development and interventions advocate for early, intensive, and appropriate therapy. Mask mandating on therapists, teachers, parents, care providers, and children adversely affect our special needs populations, especially the pediatric population. This population needs to see and hear their communication partners and instructors. They need full access to oxygen through their noses to achieve proper oral resting postures. Children with sensory processing disorders would be adversely affected by masking. Requiring a child with sensory processing disorder or neurological deficits to wear a mask may create behavioral and emotional problems in a child and increase the burden on families and the child's educational program. Furthermore, putting such children at risk of an infection from a mask that could cause this child undue pain and suffering. I also request that you pass a resolution to ban vaccine passports, just as Muskegon County did. It is vital that we protect our Ottawa citizens from going down this destructive path of creating a caste social system. Vaccine passports and immunization proof, in order to be given freedoms and social benefits, puts those medically and religiously opposed to vaccinate as second-class citizens. Coercions to be experimental lab rats and subjects to a massive big pharma genetic experiment in order to breathe freely, sit together in church and restaurants, and shop and go to school is unethical and should never be a practice enforced by our county. We try so hard to teach our children to not bully and to stop social pressures, yet we have a Health and Human Services creating a system of pressure.
Thank you, Maya.
Up next, we have Sandy Benton.
Okay.
Unmute yourself.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, as she mentioned, I'm Sandy Benton, Judson Road, Spring Lake. I ask that you put forth the resolution to restore freedom in Ottawa County as well. You know, we come to these meetings each week and you're asking us to trust the MDA, HHS, and the CDC. And I just have a few questions today to consider. Did you know that the CDC holds multiple patents on vaccines, bringing in millions of dollars, which is a conflict of interest? Did you remember that the MDHHS director tried to cover up the Flint water crisis? But public outcry is what brought this issue to light. Have you heard about the Tuskegee experiment, which used the Black population in Tuskegee to inject syphilis into them and promised medical care in return? But in the end, they just left them struggling on their own with no medical care as promised, and it destroyed their community. They were left used and abused. Have you heard of SB 40? The 40th simian virus found in the first polio vaccine. And even though they knew it was in there, they knew it would cause cancer, they didn't remove it from the shelves. Have you heard about the Vioxx scandal, where Merck tried to cover up their role in multiple deaths associated with this drug and attempted to skirt around the liability? Did you know that no vaccine is tested for carcinogenic, teratogenic, or mutagenic effects? Why do you think vaccine manufacturers aren't studying whether or not their vaccine will cause cancer, mutate, or cause birth defects? If you believe they're so concerned about our health, shouldn't ensuring vaccines do not cause cancer be their first priority? Are you aware that the childhood list of adverse events associated with multiple childhood vaccines is long. Seizures, Guillain-Barré, speech delays, Crohn's, IBS, pediatric arthritis, pediatric type 1 diabetes. I know a number of kids with this diagnosed in 2nd grade. Eczema, autoimmune disease, encephalitis, which is brain swelling and a precursor to autism. Commissioner, I'm guessing you've also heard about SIDS, but probably rarely heard about it when you were in your 20s. Over and over again, we see pharmaceutical lobbyists controlling policy, ordinances, and even our elected officials. We see the health department tight with the FDA, tight with the CDC and the pharmaceutical companies. Now we have thousands of doctors worldwide coming out with innocuous therapies for COVID, which include liposomal vitamin C, ivermectin, and hydroxychloroquine. And what do we experience? Censorship, constant censorship. And we're now watching the FDA work to take out other health supplements that many use for a variety of reasons. These supplements are like N-acetylcysteine, liposomal vitamin C, melatonin, 5-HTP. These are things you probably use. Isn't it interesting that COVID vaccines would not have received emergency use authorization had an approved therapeutic not been found? What makes drug manufacturers more money? A push for a worldwide vaccine or an expensive drug or supplement that's been used for over 50 years? Commissioner and Ottawa County residents, when do we start to question why the heavy censorship? Why the real push of this vaccine on the population and our vulnerable youth? We have Fauci and the CDC telling us not to mask up, then mask up.
Thank you, Sandy. Who's next?
Up next, we have Dana Odell.
Dana?
Hi. Hello. My name is Dana Odell. I'm at Jamesfield Drive in Hudsonville, Michigan. You may have heard the phrase, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. For me, that phrase comes to mind when I reflect on the information we're being given by the CDC, our state health department, and even our county health department. We're being told that there are only certain ways to handle the COVID-19 situation. Everything seems like nails. Our toolkit has more than just a hammer, though. There are more ways to solve the COVID-19 related issues beyond vaccination, masking, and social distancing. Why is it that others that share solutions for treating COVID-19 are being silenced or humiliated? I would encourage the Commission to seek input from other sources on how to best craft solutions for combating COVID-19 in a way that works for everyone and allows them the freedom to choose. That means not requiring masks to participate in daily tasks like school and work, or essentially guilting unvaccinated people from fear of being discriminated against if they don't get vaccinated. I'm not asking you to ignore the information from these sources of the CDC or health departments. I would just encourage each of you to keep it as one source of all the information you consider when making the important choices for our county. It's easy for me to give a one-sided comment and leave it at that, but I would like to do more. I'm happy to have a conversation and work with anyone on the commission to come up with solutions. I'm sure there are others in our community that would offer the same. Help us help you. Thank you for your time.
Up next, we have Ryan Kelly.
Ryan?
Ryan Kelly.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ryan Kelly. I live on Wild Duck Lane in Allendale. I'm a resident of Ottawa County. Want to share a few things with you here today as I listen to these people speak and share their thoughts. I give many thanks to them for stepping up and supporting common sense. And I am here to let you know that I likewise support you guys signing this resolution. It's important that we align ourselves with our constitutional freedoms, number one. Number two, I have not heard one person come and speak against this. It's very clear what the people want here. I'm here to also encourage you to do as the people are asking. It's very important that we have leadership that aligns with the will of the people. Have an amazing day.
Thank you, Ryan.
Looks like we've got 3 more. Next up is Ross. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
You're on, Ross.
Yeah, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. My name is Ross Ziegenthaler, 15620 Willows Drive, Spring Lake. Also a business owner in Crockery Township. I had emailed every member of this board on May 13th a resolution based off of Muskegon County's resolution that was passed on May 11th to ban vaccine passports. I received 0 replies, so I'm here today to read the Ottawa County resolution ban on social passports or vaccine passports. And I will start now. Ottawa County resolution banning social passports or vaccine passports within the boundaries of Ottawa County. Whereas the Constitution of the United States of America, under the provisions of the Fourth Amendment of the Bill of Rights, provides all citizens the right to privacy, including medical privacy. And whereas pressuring or coercing citizens into experimental medical treatments violates the protections given to all people in the Nuremberg Code. And whereas medical records and information are private and fall under HIPAA protections. And whereas the state of Michigan allows for medical, religious, and philosophical exemptions for vaccine. And whereas Ottawa County Department of Public Health and MDHHS acknowledges there are many instances where an individual, along with their doctor, decide that specific medical procedures or pharmaceuticals are unsafe for their patient. In fact, our own federal government deemed vaccines unavoidably unsafe in 1986. Whereas social passports, also known as vaccine passports, do not take into consideration the large number of citizens who have contracted and recovered from SARS-CoV-2 and therefore naturally immune. And whereas all current available vaccines are not FDA approved and are considered experimental, and whereas the CDC, MDHHS, and the Ottawa County Department of Public Health acknowledge that vaccinated individuals are able to contract and spread SARS-CoV-2, and whereas because vaccinated individuals are able to contract and spread SARS-CoV-2, a space where only vaccinated individuals are present holds the same risk as a space where individuals are both vaccinated and unvaccinated. And whereas social passports, also known as vaccine passports, are thus highly discriminatory with no real benefits to society, and whereas the commissioners are obligated by oath to protect the rights of citizens of Ottawa County by upholding the Constitution of the United States of America. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Ottawa County supports a ban on social passports, also known as vaccine passports, in all government buildings, public spaces, businesses, and places of employment. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to Governor Whitmer, Senator Roger.
Up next, we have Lene.
Lene?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Lene Monera, 6722 Pierce Street, Allendale. I'm going to skip around a bit. First, in regards to Marcia's comments, she was asked by a commissioner what the current order is regarding the MDHHS, or the current order regarding masks in school. And her response was that if school kids are not vaccinated, they still have to wear a mask. What Marcia fails to mention, and it seems to be missing from the current narrative, is the fact that there are exceptions under the MDHHS order, exceptions to mask wearing that are not dependent on one's vaccine status. First of all, there's exceptions for those who cannot medically tolerate a mask. That's always been the case. There's also exceptions for those engaged in a religious service, and that exception directly applies to our kids in parochial schools. So while I understand the focus of the Ottawa County Health Department is on vaccines, personally, I would like to see our health department publicly acknowledge that there are exceptions to mask wearing besides one's vaccination status. The other thing that Marcia spoke about was children at Helen DeVos Children's Hospital admitted due to COVID issues. While not downplaying the severity of that, could the health department provide statistics of kids at Helen DeVos Children's Hospital who have been admitted for mental health issues, including suicide attempts, depression, and anxiety? That is an issue that respectfully I would request a report on from the health department at the next meeting. The other thing I want to mention is that the most recent MDHHS order that goes into effect on June 1 still has the same discretionary language in it that all the orders did. The one part of it says that local health departments, quote, are authorized, end of quote, to carry out and enforce the orders. Our authorized means they are allowed. It does not mean our local health department shall or are required to carry out the orders. The other section that has some discretion built into it has to do with contact tracing, and that's section 6B. It still has a language that says, upon request, establishments have to provide names and phone numbers of individuals to the local health department for purposes of contact tracing. Establishments include schools. So my suggestion a month or two ago was, health department, how about we stop requesting all this information because we've seen the mental health effects on our kids. I want to close my comments with 2 Timothy 1 verse 7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind. Commissioners, you start every meeting with a prayer. So it appears that some of you live by biblical principles. As the leaders of Ottawa County, I would urge you to lead not out of fear, but with the spirit that God has given us, a spirit of power, love, and sound mind. One concrete way.
Looks like we've got two more. Tracy Reed.
Go ahead, Tracy. Unmute yourself and give us your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
You bet. Hello, my name is Tracy Reed. I live at 14276 Virginia Lane in Grand Haven, Michigan. And I'd like to thank all of you for your time. And I really want to thank every single citizen, fellow citizen that has spoken in person or on the line today. I am so proud of every one of you, and I'm happy to be living in the community with all of you. I think what's so important to acknowledge, gentlemen, as I watch you on my screen today, I have seen one person take notes, and I'm really astounded by that. I've watched people, all of you sit there. Most of you seem to be very attentive. A few of you don't appear to be, and I'm a little startled by that, considering you are all here to listen to us. We are your constituents. We have elected you, and by and large, I bet many of us are proud of every one of you, and we look forward to having every one of you represent our voices. We are not the outliers. I bet that we are the heart of the bell curve right here. And I have not had anybody from the county reach out to me to ask me what my position is on any of this. Philip Kyers is a person who is in my district, and I've not seen anything come through asking me what my perspective is on masks, on the vaccine, or anything. And I find that to be a little bit odd. But I don't want to stop there. I want to reinforce the fact that we are all awakened, as you can see, and I suspect you'll see many more of these meetings having people attending. I've been attending these online for a little while now, and I can see more and more people joining, and I'm very excited about that. I am against the masks for the reasons that have been stated previously. I do not wish to have vaccine passports, and I hope that that is something each and every one of you will take forward to Lansing so they understand what this county does and does not support. I hope that you will follow the science as you have been urged to throughout this meeting today. And I urge you to pass that resolution that was shared earlier by those very courageous and articulate women. And I thank every one of them. So I did talk about, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover today, but I do want to say this too. I think that there have been people that have been clearly wrapping up their thoughts, and instead of giving them kindly a couple of extra seconds, I watch you ring that bell and cut them off or tell them that their time is up. And I find that I just feel that it's not very civil or kind. And I would hope that the people that we have elected would have just a tidbit of patience. Thank you.
Up next, we have Lauren. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
We've got you, Lauren.
Hi, my name is Lauren Nykamp from Hudsonville, and I am calling today to ask that the health department end their emergency status. As your epidemiologist stated, COVID-19 statuses are improving. In fact, the usafacts.org site says that on May 23, there were 0 deaths and 0 new cases, which your data agrees. There's been a sliding steep decline for all ages. And as you said, your goal of 70% vaccination for the most threatened group has been reached. I am also asking that the mandates for masks be rescinded. Our students do not need to be wearing them. And as the health department said, they deeply respect everyone's health choice. I would ask that they stop pushing the vaccines on people. Stop suggesting it. We are smart people. We will make the correct choice. In addition, please do not have vaccine sites in our schools. That only pushes it on these young people who the science shows it is not effective for. I would also ask that the commissioners would please start answering people. I contacted Mr. Meppelink and did not get a response. I contacted him regarding DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion being pushed from the county level into our schools. Many people would say DEI is the same as critical race theory, which says that in order to end racism, we must elevate it. These things are creating division in our communities. Our emergency mandates are creating division between parents and school boards. These DEI committees are creating division amongst our children in the school buildings. Please create unity. This pandemic has created separation and division. Please create unity in effective ways and sign the resolution that was brought to you today. Thank you for being here and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Lauren.
Up next, we have Deanna.
Hello.
Hi, Deanna.
Hi, my name is Deanna Heisinga, and I'm from Hudsonville. First of all, since I'm the last speaker, I guess I'd like to thank all of the parents. I know a few of them, and I'm so proud of them for coming today to speak. I would like to also ask that you would please pass the amendment that was put forth to you. And I would also like to ask that you please, as other people have suggested, go home and do the research. It is out there. It shows you the science that the MDHHS is not giving us, the people. But for those of us who care about our kids, who want to protect them, we've done the research for you. And many of us can provide you with that. We are just asking you as your constituents to please hear us. We're not going to go away. We are here to fight for our families, for our communities, for our neighbors, and for our churches, for goodness sakes. We all are in this together. You have kids, you have grandkids, you have daughters and sons. We need to end this governor's tyranny. We can do this. We don't need Lansing. There are other states in Michigan, other cities in Michigan that have done this already. Baraga, Traverse City, we're all working together, but we need you to help us. Please hear us today. Hear the parents and the mothers who are desperate for your help. Like I said, we're not going to go away. We're here. We're in this. We are going to fight, and we need you with us. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen. We appreciate you. We know this isn't easy, but we're done. We're done being nice. Now it's time to fight, and let's do this together. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day. God bless you.
Anna.
We have one more. Kristen, if you can unmute yourself.
Yes, are you able to hear my audio?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Kristen Megan Kelly. I am an Air Force veteran who worked in bioenvironmental engineering. I've worked in the field of occupational environmental toxicology for over 18 years, and I am a senior industrial hygienist. Unfortunately, a deputy public health officer within your region decided to defame me and slanderize me in a Daily Beast article and has no idea of my background. See, I've spent 12 years working in pandemic preparedness, planning, and response. I have tested over 10,000 masks and respirators. I am a profession that has worked in healthcare for most of my career. I've been embedded within healthcare systems, being responsible for how to handle the influx of patients during a pandemic, managing the decontamination line through a memorandum of agreement through a VA hospital and the entire city of Chicago. I tell you all this about my background because I sit on infection committees within hospitals, and I absolutely know that masks do not and cannot stop a virus that is aerosolized in either direction. When I see quotes from member of this board and member of the whole county health department walking outside of their lane, pretending that they're at all credentialed industrial hygiene, by the way, I'm also cross-credentialed in public health, we should have been implementing engineering controls from day one. You will very slowly see now that people are going to be talking about how numbers have gone down because of increased ventilation practices. There's something called the hierarchy of controls, and we skip that. Just like in the military, I was taught to follow the chain of command. What everyone did in our state government, which they violated their oath, is they failed to follow the hierarchy of controls. You went at the very bottom of that pyramid and you instituted cloth masks. Do you understand when you think that masks work? You are saying that the neighbor that's making masks, the ones you buy on Etsy, your grandma's curtains are somehow gonna stop a bio 2 level contaminant? In healthcare systems, even an N95 respirator, which requires medical clearance, training, and fit testing, cannot stop this virus. That's why I put people in CAPRs and PAPRs that are actually NIOSH rated respirators to stop this virus. We put the cart before the horse, and in doing so, we cause greater harm. Now, I'm speaking to the science, and I have the science on my side. I've gone against the CDC. Yes, here in Michigan, I'm a resident of Michigan. I've gone against the CDC because I'm a court credential expert witness in my field. I've helped doctors get their medical licenses back, and I've helped businesses fight these orders in every state. I've helped open states like Texas, North Dakota, because I took an oath to do no harm and to help people and provide them with a safe and healthful working environment. And what everyone has been allowed to do in this county is harm our children, harm the employees, because you're spineless and you allow this to happen. If a doctor goes outside of their lane, it's malpractice. So what do we call this? It's called unprofessionalism and tyranny. And I highly encourage every single one of you sitting here, please write this down. I can see you, please write this down. Stephen Petty, Dr. Frank, part 2 on YouTube. You will see a certified industrial hygienist, a certified safety professional, and a PE.
We don't have any more.
All right, that ends the public comment time. The next thing on the agenda is, there's a public comment at the end of the meeting. You already spoke today, so there is a second time at the end of the meeting. The next thing on the agenda is approval of agenda. Can I get a motion, please?
So
I
moved.
think there's two things, wait a minute, there's two things we're going to change on the agenda. Correct?
We're going to add the resolution that terminates the
Yes, we're going to do
the order
Emergency.
and take off the resolution that establishes the committee or postpone it till next time.
yeah, so one is going to be replaced by the emergency, what's it called? The determination of the local state of emergency is going to be from administration, number one, as opposed to the creation of the COVID-19 American Rescue Plan.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, all right. It's been moved and supported. Comments or questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, what is the disposition of the ARP committee? Is that,
We had several changes and we hadn't heard from people. And so we wanted to do it when we have it all set.
okay, and that is going to go back to planning or just come straight back to us?
Coming back straight to you.
All right, any other comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Next thing is under actions and reports, consent resolutions. Mr. Fenske.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make the motion to approve consent resolutions 1 and 2.
Support. It's been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Hopeflor, Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg, Mr. DeYoung, Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Methalink, Mr. Baumann, Mr. Fenske, and Mr. Bergman.
I vote yes, and please remember to
Motion carries.
say a couple of words because otherwise our friend Phil won't even know how we vote. So that passed, right?
Yes.
Next thing is public hearing regarding Ottawa County sewage disposal bonds. Mr. Fenske?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make the motion to open the public hearing to receive comments on the Ottawa County sewage disposal bonds.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Opposed, same sign. Is there anyone in the public who would like to address the commission regarding the public hearing on the Ottawa County sewage bond disposal bonds? I'll take a motion to close.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing on the Ottawa County sewage disposal bonds.
Been supported to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Under action items from administration, the emergency declaration release. Mr. Dannenberg, please.
Yes, so the resolution you have before you today is.
Wait a
to-
minute. Mr. Dannenberg was going
I
to
thought you
make the
said
motion.
Vanderbilt.
No, Dannenberg.
That happens all the time, doesn't it?
Does it ever happen that I get his pay or he gets mine?
It's yours too.
Yeah, that's what. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to approve and authorize the board chairperson and the clerk register to sign the resolution to terminate the local state of emergency within Ottawa County due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Second.
Seconded. Now,
All right.
Mr. Vandenberg.
Yes, okay, so the day has come. It's been 14 months coming, but this does end the emergency order in Ottawa County. And I would just direct your attention to the last page. During the pandemic, I did issue 28 administrative rules in order, and again, I just need to say it, that this was always internally focused. We never shut down a business or made a kid wear a mask or anything by having the county emergency declaration. That was consistently, I think, confused, and I get it, with the state declaration. But as you can see on the back, we have 8 of the administrative rules have expired. We have 6 that will expire today with your action. We do ask that 5 of them continue until June 1, simply because we need to have time to adapt. You know, the MIOSHA orders just came out, and we are opening the building to normal business on June 1. Also, as of Monday, we started bringing employees back. However, that is a process that doesn't happen in one day where you just say, hey, everybody come back. It took IT a week. We thought it was almost miraculous that they were able to get everybody set up in their home, everybody who worked from their homes set up in their homes within a week. It'll take about a week to bring people back, get them plugged in right, and all that sort of thing. So June 1 for that, just as an example. We do have 3 that are set for September 30. Those are all the additional health employees that we brought on. And in the event that we do need more time on those than they're being paid for with COVID funds, we'll bring that back to the board for reapproval. And then there's a couple others, the extension of employee vacation time, so the employees didn't lose time, goes through December 31 of 2021. I do think one of the things that we will consider with the ARP funds will be to pay off some of those balances so that we can get balances down to where they belong and not have an unreasonable expectation for employees to take time, which will create problems in other parts of the organization. Then there's 3 that are listed as ongoing. For example, the temporary increase in canteen meal rates, that's a contract for jail food. That will stay in place until there's 250 in the daily population in the jail, and then that will automatically go away. And then also you'll see ongoing, we do from time to time issue the plans. We just did one last week that's based on MDHHS, MIOSHA. For example, at this point, employees can work in the buildings without a mask if they're vaccinated. And so it's just kind of putting that information out as it changes. And I think that really covers the different categories here. And so that's what you have before you today.
All right. Any comments or questions? Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Is that you, Frank? Okay. No, I still am concerned. I think it's great that we're kind of wrapping this up, but I am concerned about the ability to hold virtual meetings still throughout the county. I think there's still and at least in the city of Holland, that would like it to continue for a little bit longer so that they can continue to wrap up their smaller committees. I think that we can just add something to that state of emergency continues for that purpose alone.
Yeah, you would have to continue the state of emergency to cover that.
Yeah, I think I think as we wrap up, I think if we can just focus it just, on the virtual meetings alone, I think it kind of takes care of some of those local concerns as well as, wrapping up, some of the bigger pieces.
All right. Frank?
Yeah, are you referring to rule number 7, Doug? I wonder where it talks about the
Rule
Board of
number 7.
Commissioners rule regarding remote participation.
Yeah, I guess.
Actually, I'm sorry, guys, that one's actually different. So
Okay.
this was only internally focused.
Okay,
That the administrative rules, I did not do an administrative rule for the local units to be able to have virtual meetings. That is something they could do because you had the local state of emergency. So that was
Right.
separate from the administrative
so the
rules.
city of Holland will still be able to continue if they wanted to, but Ottawa County Commissioners will be required to participate in person then as of today.
The way this is drafted, the only way a local unit of government or school in the county would continue with virtual meetings is if they adopt their own
Right.
local emergency.
Okay.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
So all of us are back in person as of next board meeting.
As of the county, yes.
Okay.
All of you are back in person per the next board meeting.
And how is that aligned, Al, with what the state might have out there, or even the state legislators? I believe we're also working on something regarding remote.
I think that fell
Participation.
apart. So there was a couple bills that were proposed. And as I recall, I remember Luke Meerman had one of them, one of our representatives. And I think that they were just not able to get to an agreement with the governor on that, and that legislation was not followed through on. So as of right now, the only way in the state of Michigan to have virtual meetings is through an emergency order.
Okay.
And the state does not have one that covers that, so it would be up to counties or the local units of government to do that.
Okay.
Anyone else? So Holland and Grant Ferrisburg.
Those were the only two that indicated,
Yes.
in Holland, it was a matter of 2 weeks. In Ferrisburg, I didn't hear a timeline, but those are the only two when polled that said that they would like to see it continue. for
Out
that
of the
reason.
ones that were polled,
24 were
didn't-
polled.
didn't Lou Hunt do that survey?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
And
20
what was the numbers? Was it 10-2 or
It
12-2?
was 14 responded and said they didn't think you needed to. 2 responded and said it would help them if you did. And the other 8 did not respond.
So Holland can go ahead and establish their own,
They could do that, correct?
let them do it.
Anyone else? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Garcia,
I vote yes.
Mr. Fensky,
I vote yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
But no.
no. Mr. Dannenberg,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Hopeflor,
Vote yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
I vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
No.
Motion passes.
The next thing is from Planning and Policy. Greg, Mr. DeYoung, Mr. DeYoung.
Thank you, it's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the item Explorers Trail Reynolds easement, I move to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the Reynolds easement as required for construction of the Grand River Greenway Explorers Trail of a cost of $0 due to a donation. Support.
Been moved and supported. Comments or questions? I believe we can do a roll call because there's no cost in this, correct? Am I correct with that, Sherry? Or do you?
Did you
Yeah,
miss-
we should do a roll call with it.
Yeah, go ahead, do a roll call.
Okay, Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann
Yes.
says yes.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Fensky,
I vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
I vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
I also vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
Mr. Hopefler,
I vote yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
I vote yes.
Mr. Kyers,
I vote yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
I vote yes.
Motion passes.
Our next motion, I move to approve and authorize the board chairperson, clerk register to sign the Novoski easement as required for construction of the Grand River Greenway Itemized Explorer Trail, again, a cost of zero due to a donation.
Been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kyers,
I vote yes.
Mr. Hopefler,
I vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Vote yes.
Mr. Fensky,
I vote yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
Mr. Bauman, and Mr. Bergman.
I vote yes.
Motion passes.
Our next motion regarding the Explorers Trail Deering easement, I move to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the Deering easement as required for construction of the Grand River Greenway Itemized Explorer Trail of a cost of $2,000.
It's been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fensky,
I vote yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Vote yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Vote yes.
Mr. Hopefler,
I vote yes.
Mr. Bauman,
I vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
I vote yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman. Motion passes.
Our next motion regarding the Explorers Trail Pelton easement, I move to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the Pelton easement as required for construction of the Grand River Greenway Itemized Explorer Trail at a cost of $1,776.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Zylstra,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Fensky,
I vote yes.
Mr. Bauman,
I vote yes.
Mr. Kyers,
I vote yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
I vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
Mr. Hopefler,
I vote yes.
Mr. Mr. Terpstra,
I vote yes.
and Mr. Bergman. Motion passes.
Next, regarding the Explorers Trail Wilson easement, I move to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the Wilson easement as required for construction of the Grand River Greenway Itemized Explorer Trail at a cost of $2,246.
Support.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bauman,
Vote yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Vote yes.
Mr. Hopefler,
Vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
I vote yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Vote yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Vote yes.
Mr. Fensky, and Mr. Bergman.
Oh, yes.
Motion passes.
Regarding the Explorers Trail route easement, I move to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the route easement as required for construction of the Grand River Greenway Itemized Explorer Trail at a cost of $1,428.
Support.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Terpstra,
Vote yes.
Mr. Hopefler,
Vote yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Vote yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
I vote yes.
Mr. Bauman,
Vote yes.
Mr. Fensky, Mr. Dannenberg,
I vote yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
I vote yes.
Motion passes.
Our next motion regarding the Explorers Trail Canoper easement, I move to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the Canoper easement as required for construction of the Grand River Greenways Itemized Explorer Trail at a cost of $2,246. $246.
The actual cost is $2,844. If you want to make a note of that, that's correct? $2,844. So it's been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Garcia,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Bauman,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Vote yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
I vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
I vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Hopeflor,
I vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Fensky,
Oh, yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Our next motion is regarding the Explorers Trail Ryan Glick easement. I move and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the Ryan Glick easement as required for construction of the Grand River Greenways Idema Explorers Trail at a cost of $15,000.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kyers,
I vote yes.
Mr. Hopeflor,
I vote yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
I vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
I vote yes.
Mr. Bauman,
I vote yes.
Mr. Fensky,
I vote yes.
Mr. Bergman.
I vote yes.
Motion passes.
Our next motion is the Idema Explorers Trail Robert and Carol Glick. I moved to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the Robert and Carol Glick easement as required for construction of the Grand River Greenway Idema's Explorer Trail at a cost of $25,000.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Fensky,
I vote yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Hopeflor,
I vote yes.
Mr. Bauman, Mr. Kyers,
I vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
I vote yes.
All right, motion passes.
Next motion, again, regarding the Idema's Explorer Trail Hoving easement. I move to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the Hoving easement as required for construction of the Grand River Greenway Idema's Explorer Trail at a cost of $15,000.
Support.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Dannenberg,
I vote yes.
Mr. Bauman,
Vote yes.
Mr. Fensky,
Vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
I vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
I vote yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Vote yes.
Mr. Hopeflor,
Vote yes.
Mr. Zylstra, Mr. Kyers,
Mr. Kyers.
Mr. Kyers,
I vote yes.
okay, and Mr. Bergman.
Vote yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Next, regarding the Walcott real estate purchase, I move to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the real estate agreement with H. Walcott Farms LLC for the purchase of 48 acres in Allendale Township at a price of $280,000 as part of the Grand River Greenway.
Second.
It's been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Go ahead.
You sat here the whole time, might as well get one question. How many, or how much more until it's all connected? From like Millennium to Grand Haven? Or like when do you expect to have the whole trail completed?
27? 2027 is when we would expect to have it completed with construction.
More land?
I'm sorry?
How much more land do we need to get?
Well, so we're closing in on the easements, and then as we close in on the easements on each side of Bass River, then we just have to finalize the route through Bass River.
Okay.
And we're getting really close.
Awesome.
Yeah, a couple of questions, Jason. Of the 48 acres that we're currently talking about, it mentions that we're leasing a portion of that for agricultural purposes. Now, what percentage of that is being leased? And as I read it, right, it looks like we will continue to lease that for agricultural purposes. Is that right?
Yes. So
So the
currently,
48 acres are all 48 acres intended for agriculture?
well, the majority of it's being leased. So there's a little bit of it that probably isn't. I mean, the current owner, it's owned for agricultural lease. So there's quite a bit of it along the river there. That's a nice buffer, but we'll negotiate once we have this done. We'll negotiate and the lease, the ag lease with the current owner and accept that, and then we can determine in the future whether or not we want to bid that back out, extend the lease, or restore the land. So.
Okay. So we're purchasing the 48 acres because we need a portion of that in order to follow the trail. Is that what it's for? Okay.
Yeah. And then it'll allow us to, we'll have a lot of recreational opportunities with this.
Okay.
There's quite a bit of frontage right on the river. Also, it's a connection to Bass River. So.
Will there be a time when we're going to say that we don't want to lease that for agricultural purposes? Or is this something that we're planning in the future to use that property for other purposes besides agricultural?
I think so. I think at some point in the future, we would expect to, it also has great possibility for wetland mitigation. So yes, but at least for the immediate future, it can mitigate the operating costs with just maintaining it as is.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks. We're ready to vote. Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Kyers,
I vote yes.
Mr. Holtzler,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
I vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Fensky, Mr. Dannenberg,
I vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Vote yes.
Mr. Bauman,
I vote yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
I vote yes.
Motion passes.
Our next motion is a lease for the City of Holland for Tunnel Park. I move to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the lease agreement with the City of Holland to provide for the Parks Commission's management of property adjacent to Tunnel Park for a 20-year period at a cost of $500.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fensky,
Absolutely, yes. Good deal.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
I vote yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Holtzler,
I vote yes.
Mr. Bauman,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
I vote yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
I vote yes.
Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
From the Finance and Administration Committee, Mr. Bauman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regards the fiscal year 2021 budget adjustment, I make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2021 budget adjustment per the attached schedule.
Second.
Seconded. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Zylstra,
Vote yes.
Mr. Fensky,
Vote yes.
Mr. Bauman,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Vote yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
Mr. Holtzler,
I vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Vote yes.
Motion passes.
Regarding the allocation of the 2020 unassigned fund balance, I make a motion to approve approve the recommendation to transfer $2,727,083 of the 2020 general fund unassigned fund balance to the capital project fund.
Supported.
Been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bauman,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Hopeflor,
Vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
I vote yes.
Mr. Fenske,
I vote yes.
Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Regarding the fiscal year 2022 Michigan Department of Corrections Plan and Application, I make a motion to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the fiscal year 2022 Michigan Department of Corrections Plan and Application.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Terpstra,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Hopeflor,
Vote yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Vote yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Oh, yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Vote yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Vote yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Vote yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
I vote yes also.
Motion passes.
Regarding the property assessed clean energy program establishment, I make a motion to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the resolution of intent to establish a property assessed clean energy program and set a public hearing for June 8 of 2021.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Al, you want to, for the benefit of the public, just
Lighten
explain?
us.
I think since we have Becky here and she's our subject matter expert, I'll have her do a summary and she can also answer any questions you might have.
Okay. She's the expert.
She
Okay.
is the expert, at least in this room.
At least in this room. Thank you. Yes. Good afternoon. Yeah, property assessed clean energy. It is a tool enabled by statute, much like some of the other tools that we use for economic development. What it does is it allows developers of a project to install energy efficient and renewable energy improvements to their project, but they are able to secure funding that is collateralized with a special assessment. And that assessment runs with the land. So a landowner then can put the improvements in the assessment will allow them to pay for it over time and not have the concern of if they sell the property in 5 years, they're going to have a balloon payment and not get those the value out of that improvement via the savings on the energy. The next landowner will then continue to pay on that assessment. They'll continue to get those reduced costs. So it makes it a really good deal for the developer to put in renewable energy and energy efficient improvements on properties. The lenders like it because it's a very secure investment on their part. This is a program that has been around since about 2010. There's probably about 48 other communities or so in Michigan that utilize it. There's many other states that also utilize it. Of the 48 or so communities that have it, probably 18 to 20 have done projects. Some of them have only done one project with the statute. Some of them have done up to a dozen projects, so it varies. The impetus for this was a developer that has a project he's looking at in Holland Township, and he'd like to utilize the tool, which is why we started looking at it again. Paul has had discussions with folks and has looked at it in the past. It's just not something we had taken action on yet. But we do have a developer that's very interested in using it. And we wanted to set the jurisdiction as county-wide. Holland Township itself could have set its own jurisdiction, passed a resolution and had just their own community utilize it. But we felt it would be better if the county took it on a whole, because if the neighboring townships decided they wanted to utilize it, then they'd be able to do that through the county program and not have to go through the whole process of establishing a resolution again. Some questions you might have are, what is the cost or the staff time that might be needed to implement this program? Extremely low. What we would utilize and what most programs utilize, I'm not aware of any programs in the state that don't utilize Lean and Green Michigan, a nonprofit that does all of the background legwork to put these projects into place. They get paid by a fee at closing by the developer. So we don't have any cost for their services. They're made whole by the developer, and the only time that we have involved is really just coordinating meetings, vetting out the project, making sure it's consistent with property valuations, consistent with economic development goals, consistent with zoning and development goals that we have. So it's a fairly low investment from the county standpoint and a really nice tool for developers. So I take any questions you might have about it at this time.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to understand what is the benefit for Ottawa County to take this action? Why is it necessary? And if it wasn't approved, would these opportunities be available for developers through other resources or sources?
So would this be available for developers through other resources? And the answer to that is no, and not in this exact way, because this is the only program that allows them to secure those improvements through an assessment that can run over the long term.
Okay.
Otherwise, they have to secure traditional financing that is on a much shorter term with much larger payments, and it's much more difficult for them to do these improvements, which was why sometimes they are not put in. This way, they can do it safely with long-term financing. And then once they sell the property, again, they don't have that burden of a balloon payment that runs with the land, so it'll go on to the next landowner. I think the opportunity is that Ottawa County would like to be able to, I think, utilize more renewable energy opportunities out there and more energy efficient. We want to see more of that in our buildings. That's good for everybody. So I think it's just one more tool we can put out there for developers. And it's just a good tool for lenders to secure financing, and it's very solid for them too. So.
Okay, and I'm still catching up from the presentation that they made a couple of meetings ago. So my other question is, are there other organizations that would provide the same?
The services for lean and green?
Right.
There are not any other ones that I'm aware of. I asked them when we met originally, I said, so who is your competition? Is there anybody else out there doing what you do? And there aren't any other organizations within the state of Michigan that I'm aware of that do it. I suspect if I went looking, maybe some of the organizations that serve other states maybe could do business in Michigan. But I haven't found anybody else. And it is a big administrative lift. We do have every option to do all of that on our own. We don't need Lean and Green Michigan, but it would be a very big administrative burden, similar to, if we were to accept entitlement funds through CDBG. That is a huge administrative burden that's placed on the county. So it'd be, I think, a similar comparison if we were to take this on ourselves. So the fact that this organization exists, and we did visit with a number of other communities. We did spend some time with Lean and Green to get comfortable with them. They are available for any questions you guys might have. They're willing to be on this call today also. I feel pretty good about them, but there is no other competition. And that's a very good question. That's one of the ones I asked.
And then my final question is there any liability for the county if we were to approve this and something went wrong down the road between a property developer and PACE?
None that I have identified, and I did have Doug Van Essen go through all of the agreements in the program report to make sure that it met his standards. So the risk is really inherently very low. I think the biggest risk for us would be, I don't think there's any liability, and I think we'd be well covered with, our general liability that currently exists. But, should we have to deal with a delinquent tax, it would have to go through the same process through the treasurer's office and like any other delinquent tax system would. So that would be a little bit of an administrative burden should we need to do that. But that's fairly rare according to Lean and Green. That's a very uncommon occurrence nationwide.
Okay. I think Kyle had some questions.
Yeah, have any other developers seeked interest since we started talking about this, or is this something that's only one as of right now?
It's just the one individual, and I'd actually have to ask Paul that, because I know that Paul has a folder for PACE. I know that he's looked at it in the past. I would suspect there was other developers in the past that probably wanted to utilize it. Maybe we kicked it around a little bit, but didn't end up passing the resolution. But I couldn't say that for sure. Right now, it's just the one developer that I know of. But it could be a catalyst for other projects, or maybe it could not. Like I said, some communities only have one project, but I think it's a good one, and I would hope that it would get utilized more than that in the county.
I think we also view it as another tool in the toolbox, and kind of along the same thinking, we created the countywide brownfield redevelopment authority and the land bank authority, because it is a place where there are additional tools. We just helped Grand Haven do a housing development with the land bank in a way where the county took ownership of the property for a brief time that made the property eligible for brownfield type assistance. And then basically the land went back to the city. So I think that from a staff perspective, we don't see much in the negative way. It opens up another tool that may get used, it may not, but it doesn't really create any liability for us. That was my main question, prior was if the payments are made, who's liable for the repayment? Well, it flows with the assessment on the property. So it goes through the same process that any failure to pay taxes would follow.
So any municipality in Ottawa County could use it.
Correct. That's about it too.
Good. All right. Any other questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Garcia,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Baumann, Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Hoflor,
Oh, yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
Mr. Kyers, Mr. Kyers.
We lost. Mr.
I don't.
Is he's not on. Okay. Mr. Fensky
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Regarding the CMH personnel request, I make a motion to approve the request from CMH to make the following position additions at a total cost of $327,079. First, we would add 2 full-time benefited medical or mental health clinicians, Group T, pay grade CMHT 15 at a 1 full-time equivalent at a cost of $177,619. Second, we would add 1 full-time benefited EMR systems technician on classified pay grade CMHU 3 at a 1 full-time equivalent at a cost of $76,110. And we would remove 4 part-time non-benefited commission-based mental health clinicians and add 2 full-time benefited mental health clinicians, Group T, pay grade CMHT 15 at an increased cost of $73,350.
Support. Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hoflor,
Yes, I vote yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Vote yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Vote yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Vote yes.
Mr. Fensky,
I vote yes.
Mr. Bergman.
I vote yes.
Motion passes.
Regarding the resolution of intent to increase the 2021 millage rates for county operations, E911, Parks, Road Commission, and CMH, I make a motion to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the resolution of intent to increase the 2021 millage rate for county operations in the E911, Parks, Road Commission, and CMH special millage rates and to set a public hearing for June 8.
Supported.
Been moved and supported. Yes, Mr.
Time of year
Vandenberg.
once again,
We need to
where we
explain.
have to put it out there like we're raising taxes. But in essence, what we're doing is basically retaining the growth that we've had because we are the fastest growing county in the state. Once again, we just moved from number 8 to number 7. And basically, under the Headley Amendment, we're allowed to capture new construction and inflation up to 5%. So you'll see that the millage rate for our combined millages went down a hair, which means we were just over 5% in growth. And so that's really what this is. The millage rates are not going up. So you have not increased taxes. However, we're a growing county and the tax base is growing as well.
Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Fensky,
Vote yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Vote yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
I vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Vote yes.
Mr. Hoflor,
Vote yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Vote yes.
and Mr. Bergman. Motion passes.
Regarding the Crockery Township wastewater treatment system 2021 improvements, I make a motion to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the resolution to approve the Crockery Township wastewater treatment system 2021 improvement bonds for a project cost of $3.055 million.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Dannenberg,
Vote yes.
Mr. Baumann,
I vote yes.
Mr. Fensky,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink, Mr. Terpstra, Mr. Garcia,
Vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
Mr. Hoflor,
I vote yes.
Mr. Zalstra, and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Finally, regarding the new card access system, I make a motion to approve the low bid from Night Watch for the replacement of the county's card access system at a total cost of $625,000.
Supported.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hoflor,
I vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
I vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra, Mr. Garcia, Mr. Zelstra, Mr. Fensky,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Oh, yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
Mr. Bauman, and Mr. Bergman.
I vote yes.
Motion passes.
Next thing on agenda is appointments. We have none. Discussion items. Under discussion items, we have a gentleman that has been waiting patiently for quite some time to give us a Veterans Affairs 2020 annual report. Is that correct? All right. Give us your name, and you probably have more than 3 minutes.
I was going to say I wouldn't be offended if you set the bell on me for 3 minutes at all. Anyway, my name is Lauren Snippy. I operate with 2 colleagues, your Department of Veterans Affairs in Holland. Health Department building, and we're a part-time operation Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. And we job share that position. And the report that you have in front of you, I maybe should mention, I operated with a fellow by the name of Dan Boder, who I worked with for many years, and also a David Ziegler for 2020. You saw a gentleman here just a few moments ago that had to leave. His name is Rick Taylor. He is replacing Dave Ziegler, and he has been a probation officer with the Ottawa County Court System. So it's the 3 of us that operate this department. What you have in front of you are just the 2020 activities. And I should mention that we process applications for the Ottawa County Veterans Affairs Committee funding. This is emergency funding that's available. It's county funds. And also there's an Ottawa County burial allowance. And that's what we originally were hired to do, so to speak. And everything subsequent to that is we've expanded our services in these other areas. Really at no cost to the county, but that's where the demand was. We operate the Michigan Veterans Trust Fund, which is emergency service fund similar to the Ottawa County funding. That's available for one-time emergency services for veterans who run into an unforeseen financial emergency. And I should mention, even during this COVID time, is a time we've been least busy in the 10 years that we've been operating the program. Just because I think there's other funding out there right now and so much of it, and people are not having to be evicted if they don't pay their rent. So there's many other resources, but our business in that area is a little bit less recently. The biggest demand that we have is for what's called a veteran service officer. And none of the 3 of us are not veteran service officers, but we work with the American Legion and the VFW to bring in a person that is trained, certified in VA policy. Service officer, I liken them sometimes to an accountant is to the IRS system, a service officer is to the VA system. The VA has their own set of rules and jargon and so on and so forth, and they have to have extensive training to become certified, and then every year they go back and take a refresher course. So those are the mainstays. You see listed there the Veterans Affairs Committee funding. There are 5 persons that volunteer, 2 former county commissioners, and 3 others that volunteer their services. When we take an application, it's simply that. We take an application, help the veteran fill it out, but the decision is made by this committee whether they are eligible to receive the funding. And you see some of the expenditures listed there over the past few years. 2010 was the initial, and then we started with the county in 2011, and you see that decrease all the way through 2020. And primarily that's because we have shifted some of that burden to the Michigan Veterans Trust Fund. We sort of say to ourselves, why take from the county that feeds us, so to speak, and why not utilize the state dollars if they're available? So the shift is there. And you see on the following page sort of a correlation to that. If you look at the Michigan Veterans Trust Fund at the bottom of the page, there also is a 5-member committee. But on the following page, you see the expenditures that go back to 2006. In 2006, 7, 8, and 9, most people didn't even realize that this fund was available. And in 2011, the state asked, since we're here, would we take it over? And then you see the funding increased to 2012 was our high point of 70,000, and we were still recovering from the 2008 recession there to a degree. But the funding has gone down considerably. Last year, we spent about 35,000. There was a period of time where the state decided to take that process over, and that's where the note is there for 2016 and 17. But we asked if we could take it back because we felt that we could serve the veterans of Ottawa County administering that fund ourselves rather than through they had to go through a computer system and a telephone triage to access. And most of our veterans, which were at the time, World War II, Korean War vets, they weren't people that were computer savvy. And of course, that's why zero expenditures in 2017. I mentioned before the service, the Federal Veterans Service Officer activity. And we were able to go from when we started in Ottawa County, there was a service officer that actually came into the Allegan, one of the disabled American veterans posts there 1 day a week, 1 day a month. And we have increased that at this point. So someone comes into our office 3 days out of every week to assist veterans in applying for their federal VA benefits. That is by far the greatest demand of any of the services that we offer. Just recently, we were able to pick up a grant for medical transportation to the tune of $68,659. And if you're a veteran in Ottawa County and you do not have transportation to get to the VA clinics or to Ann Arbor, to the VA hospital in Battle Creek, or to their own personal physicians, they can call us. We verify that they are a veteran, that they were honorably discharged, and then we have a contract with Hope Network to provide that transportation. And the last page there talks about information and referral. We have had an increasing number of phone calls throughout the years, and we make every effort to address every need that's presented to us by the veterans. And we also work closely with the community. All of us have sort of a community resource, human services background, so we know what other services are available there in the community, and we utilize that for our veterans as well. Awareness is always a big issue. And for instance, next Friday, we're going to Gentex to make a presentation as to what's available for veterans. But in the last year, we sent out and I think you all have received a copy of this. This is a DISTA brochure. There are roughly around 15,000 or so veterans in Ottawa County. And we were able to get addresses through the Secretary of State's office to send out this brochure to about 5,500 of them. That's the most effective way to get something in their hands to say, we exist. If you're a veteran and you need us, here's what we can do to help you. Yet again, many of the programs are determined by an asset limit or an income limit. So when you see sometimes charts of counties that are able to access federal VA programs. Ottawa County, I think we've increased it significantly. We brought in service officers, but we still sort of fall in that lower tier only because many of our folks in Ottawa County have greater assets and income than what the VA program allows. So I don't know if you have any questions. I probably went over my 3 minutes, but.
Any questions for Warren?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I have a question, a comment, and a sidebar. First of all, thank you very much for the service that you do. Really appreciate it. My question would be, do you visit some of the American Legions and such and just go there at different times and communicate, during some of their functions or picnics just to get your word out?
We do. That's the short answer. In fact, even when we began, we visited every service organization like the VFW, American Legion, and so on in Ottawa County. We went to all the surrounding counties and looked to see how they operated. And so, yeah, it was a good learning experience. We have good communication with those organizations. In fact, the people on our committees, both the county committee and the Michigan Veterans Trust Fund, most of them are from those service organizations as well. So not only do we communicate, but we also have them available to get the word out. And we have sent this brochure to everyone as far as the county burial program. You'll see there too that we have emailed or sent letters to every funeral provider in Ottawa County and the surrounding counties to say what we have done. You will see that if you look back at the history of the Ottawa County burial allowance, you might ask in 2010, before you guys showed up, we were spending $70,000 a year on this burial allowance, which was it's $300. It's not a significant amount of money, but it was put on the books back in the day when everybody was patriotic after World War II and so on and so forth. And so $300 went a long way, but it hasn't gone up. But in 2010 and 2011 and before, if you were a veteran, all you had to do is sort of send us a bill for $300 and we paid it. We didn't ask, are you honorably discharged? We didn't ask if you had $1 million in the bank. Sometimes we were paying into people's estates, et cetera. But what we're doing now is we're following the state statute, and there is an income limit for a couple of $40,000, excluding home and car. And if the veteran has enough money to pay for their funeral, if there's no spouse involved, if they have enough, they're not eligible. The idea is to help people that do not have the financial capabilities that are veterans.
Little trivia, did you know that Mr. Rick Taylor also worked for another county?
Yeah, he told me, but I can't remember what it is right now.
He was a detention worker in Kent County.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So we hated to see him leave, but glad he's in this county now.
Yeah. Actually, Rick and I work out together every morning, and he asked, he retired, I retired. He says, what are you doing? I need something to take up my time. We got a guy that's exiting.
Nice.
And
very nice.
He just made a pretty good first impression on me. So anyway, and Al and John said, go for it. So they became part of our team. And I will say I think it's good for the county. We're reasonable. It's good for us as retired people, keeps the mind spinning. It's for a good cause, and we really enjoy it. And when one of us, has a dentist appointment, the other one fills in. You don't have any sick time. You don't have to pay any insurances for us. It's a good deal all around, and it gives us something meaningful to do. So we're planning on hanging around. I told Rick, when I'm 95 years old, you'll only be 85. You got 10 more years, and you can take it over.
Thanks, Lauren.
Anyway, thank you.
All right, go ahead. Next thing is Parks Commission update. Mr. Dannenberg has to leave. And Mr. Jason is coming up to give us this Parks update.
Presentation.
I'm sorry?
Do you want me to share your presentation?
Please.
Okay.
No, I will try to. I
What
didn't
will you
realize
try to
I
do?
was at the end of the meeting. So I think, right, today it's really, you know, a lot of people spoke in the past. Well, I moved here with 3 kids. So who would have known 23 months ago we were getting into what we were getting? So 13-year-old, 11-year-old, and 10-year-old. And then, so yes, but I will say, as a parent of those 3 kids, there's no other place we would rather be. And large part because of you all. So thank you for the outstanding work that you all do, but also because of our parks. And that's why I want to tell you a little bit about today. You know, we certainly believe we've got the best parks and open spaces here in Ottawa County. And I think we've seen it even more because of the, so how do I get it to go forward? Was it?
Tell me when. I can flip it
Okay.
for you. This. There we go.
So the, we've already had high numbers of visitation to our parks and trails, but during COVID, Google tracked mobility data, and we saw huge increases in visits to our parks. So upwards of 500% increases and well over 300% on regular basis. So during those, that year, we were leading Michigan in the counties of Michigan annually, and in some weeks nationally as well as the world. So, and I think that's a testament to our natural resources here. We have some of the best state parks here in Ottawa County too, with Grand Haven and Holland. So certainly isn't all just Ottawa County parks, but some of our amazing natural resources. So go ahead and move forward. So special thanks to all the support from you all, our parks commissioners, our county administration, but also I wanted to take this time to you all, what I call our invisible essential workers. So our park staff who have not missed a single day of work, cleaning, taking out the trash, answering the phones. So in the top right-hand corner, we did a COVID etiquette video. We came up with COVID etiquette signage. At one point in time, I know, right, our Ottawa County parks were some of the most talked about facilities in the county because they were so heavily attended during the first onset of the outbreak, right? They were so crowded. So we did one-way trails, just how to keep them open and safe. And sometimes our administrative staff would come in on Mondays and they knew they were going to have to call the next group of people who we had to cancel reservations. And it was kind of a thankless job, right? So thank you to them. They've done an amazing job of just coming up with creative solutions to help keep the parks open and safe. Go ahead. So some of the cool things we have, just some of the quotes I wanted to highlight because we've gotten dozens and dozens of quotes throughout the past 14 months. I'm proud of our beautiful parks and open spaces. We've utilized the parks almost daily. They're among the best in the country. They're vitally important to our health and strong community, and we love our parks. So, and you all have helped with that. Thank you for the role you all play. And this is so important to the community, right? And we talk about our health and our well-being, and you don't have to wear a mask in the parks, right? So get out and visit the parks. Go ahead. So I gave you all a little flyer, but we have some upcoming activities. National Trail Day, June 5th. We have activities at Riverside Park in the morning. And then in the afternoon, we have activities at the Bend area open space. So go ahead. And then at the Bend area the following week, we have a dedication. So we'll be dedicating some land acquisition we had last year. And then we will be also celebrating some construction of the Idaho Explorers Trail. Go ahead. And I have a quick video of a flyover of the Bend area in case nobody's been out there. So I think it should, and then if you just click one more time, it should automatically start. If you just click for it, it should.
You click it again, it should start. No.
Wondering if it's pulling up. I don't know if it's gonna work for you.
Well, you don't have to listen to me the whole time. No. Okay, let's go on.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Send us the
Yes,
link.
we'll send you the links. So, and then the following weekend is at Riverside, the Bio Blitz on June 12th. So that is a, starts at 5 a.m. with a walk for 10 years and older and ends, kicks off at 4 p.m. So different activities like bird hikes. We're going to shock some fish and look at fish IDs, do a fungi hike. So all sorts of cool activities. I think on the sheet, it has a schedule of activities for you. And more information on our website. So it's citizen science activities for the day. So go ahead and click on through. But this is a really cool video. And if you all haven't seen this one, I hope it loads, but it might not be clicking to.
I don't know why it's not working. Sorry.
Because you might not be hooked to the internet, I bet.
I don't know how it works.
Yep.
Sorry.
That's all right. So this will be a much quicker presentation if you miss all the videos. So we'll get those out to you.
All right.
So, and there's another video, right? So this one's the overview of the construction that we're going to be celebrating. So this one connects Cottonwood into the Bend area. So this will be the celebration we're doing on June 11th. So this is our trail map of the Grand River Greenway that, so all the different segments. So today you all approved a bunch of those easements that we've been working on. Go ahead and click. And we have the 4 different segments that we've been really pushing hard. So the Stearns Bayou, a lot of those easements today are in this segment. You can see 144 to Cedar. We have different funding kind of lined up for that. And a lot of those easements today, we're finalizing those final easements in that segment. So go ahead. And then this is the Eastmanville connector segment. So that one's kind of lined up and we have the permitting done. And we're just getting ready for that. Go ahead. Grand Ravines to Grand River Park. So we're deep in design and permitting for that. We own all of the easements actually. So this one, it will just depend on design and engineering, and hopefully we'll be able to bid it out later this year and build it next year. And then this one is Jensen Mills. So we actually have grant, trust fund grant dollars, and we are kind of holding the bid, waiting on our permit from Eagle, hoping that lumber prices will go down because that, and Jim helped with some easements on this one. This one connects us from Cottonwood over to Kent County. So then we'll be connected all the way up to Cottonwood. And we're hoping lumber prices will go down when we bend that one out. And then we'll be connected in with Kent County and be able to make it all the way into Millennium Park. So that's a big connector for us. But and we hope to break ground on that this year. So those are our four main Grand River Greenway segments that we're working on right now as we finalize kind of the land acquisitions, and then Bass River, we're kind of working on both ends, trying to connect to those ends, and then we're working with the state on those. So another thing I sent out ahead of time was our Grand River Identity Plan. And just to give you some highlights of that. So this one started in 2019, and really the parks pulled together a group, go ahead, it was an advisory team really to look at a Grand River Greenway interpretive plan. So an interpretive plan is to look at a theme of educational themes to help guide the story of the Greenway. Marty Holgren with Encompass Socio-Ecological Consulting kind of led the group of stakeholder agencies, Elgro, Grand Rapids Public Museum, MSU Extension, and we had a group of citizens from the three tribes nations all pulled together to talk about this. Go ahead. And what they found was really there was a big mix of it wasn't really, people didn't understand what the Greenway was. Go ahead to the next one. So this is our group. Oh, go ahead and back up. I apologize. So this was our group. They met multiple times throughout 2019 and 2020. And what they found was, go ahead. So they really, it was a bigger, more conversation was needed. So it was broader than just the need for an interpretive plan. It was wider ranging. So what they gave us was kind of a bigger picture of area to consider. And some program areas for us to focus on for parks, but then other topics to consider that we can share with other organizations as we're out working with partners and concepts for future consideration. So things like an arts master plan, so community engagement plan, spaces designated for Native American community ceremonies, places allowable for gathering native plants, remote experiences for 24-hour access, maybe camping experiences, and then major infrastructure needs, community nodes, so educational areas along the Greenway, really tying together that Idema Explorers Trail, potentially a welcome center, and then really looking at collaborative research, cultural arts center, tribal partnerships with GVSU, Water Research Center, and universities. So just a wealth of information in here. So it's a whole lot of information. We have it, we're going to be sharing it with other folks. So just wanted to share that with you all. All right, if you want to move on. So one of the other things that we've been working on with our acquisition of Ottawa Sands, one of our focuses was the coastal corridor, really looking at the Grand River and the coastal corridor. Go ahead. Really what the significance of that ecosystem and really its integrity and how it affects the quality of life in that area. Its impact on the economic impact of that area, as well as the landscape, and focusing on a bigger picture management of the ecology from all the way PJ Hoffmaster down past Grand Haven and out past Spring Lake. Go ahead. So we know that the majority of those wetlands have already been lost. And the biggest part of the biodiversity is gone. So really looking at that and how can we restore it and kind of protect it. In Audubon came in and what they did was they just pulled together and researched all of the existing data. They were collecting information that was already out there for us. Go ahead. And these were just in, so this report is just now coming out. That's why it wasn't included in your packet yet. We haven't presented it yet to the grant funders. So these are some of the initial kind of recommendations, but really looking at the significance of this large ecosystem as filling in the gaps for a large watershed management plan area, helping identify specific vegetation and wildlife management strategies that will support the water quality for stakeholders in the entire region. Looking at systematic monitoring of bird activity, seek high quality protection for key properties where possible, and create outreach strategies to educate the public about the corridor. So looking, and if you can back up a couple slides, so that one is nice. So looking at this whole, the bubble map, you can consider all of this, right, all as one big area, and trying to take a high level view of that as an ecosystem and the wetlands, and thinking of that as the ecology and the natural resources, and really trying to focus on, right, when we're looking at it, how it impacts the overall management of that area, and just pulling all the different partners and agencies together and thinking about how are we managing it, how are we taking care of the invasive species, the programming. So that's really what this report does. So go ahead. Go ahead. So Ottawa Sands, I included in your packet the master plan for Ottawa Sands. It was acquired in 2 different acquisitions, started in 18, and then I was lucky enough to sign the final second half of acquisition in 2019. And then we got to undertake the master planning phase, which we completed in the latter part of 2020. So it's interesting, every time I walk in there, and this is right on the corner of the lake looking out over the lake, to me, it's just breathtaking. I know some people, as I say, have the words to describe it, but when we hired the consultant to help us do this plan, so this is a mine, right? This is an old reclaimed sand mine. So, you know, very little natural resources value of this lake because it's steep sides. So, but it's so peaceful. And so one of the main points there was really to protect that experience and enhance that experience for the visitors, and then help restore the natural value and the ecology of that lake and those wetlands and those wet areas along that lake edge. So that was kind of the focus we took with this master plan. Go ahead. So it focused on several main areas. The first area really was looking at the day use trailhead area, so the main parking lot area, and then incorporating that large kind of that lake area. So getting people in around that lake, improving that access. So access for everybody, handicap accessibility. And then kind of a recreational area around the lake, and having a little bit of a beach area with a natural play. And go ahead into the next slide. So the beach area would be, I need almost a pointer. Does this have a pointer on it?
It does have one. You hit the button at the top.
But it doesn't, they won't be able to see my pointer. Will they? So, yes. Well, that's all right. So go ahead, let's go on now to the next slide. So the beach area is in the upper right-hand kind of quadrant there. And you can see the large area in the middle. So I think one of the takeaways from this master plan, only 8% of the plan overall is developed out of all that park. So I think the park itself is about 350 acres. So only 8% gets developed. All the rest either stays natural or is restored or enhanced naturally. So you can see the large wetlands and marshes. All are enhanced wetlands or lagoons. And then a lot of the pond edge is restored. So one of the exciting things about the Audubon study is it has allowed us to work with them to apply for 2 grants that we're hopeful that will allow us to start some of that restoration work along the ponds and with those lagoons that were filled in as part of this mining activity. So go ahead. So this is what the day use trailhead area would be. So this is kind of hovering over the lake and looking kind of towards Grand Haven, Ferrisburg. So looking towards the east, almost due east. So that little boardwalk kind of comes out over that overlook area. Go ahead, John. And this hovers, you can see the breasting dolphins out in the river. So in the far left corner would be where the power plant was, and that just above the parks logo is the SAG, and then the water area to the right is the Ottawa Sands Lake. Go ahead, John. So one of the exciting things, literally, I don't even think that the ink was dry on the master plan, and we had the Idema family who wrote checks to fund what we had originally labeled outfitted camping. We have a treehouse village and a yurt village, and they have fully funded both of those, the construction costs for both of those. So that's really exciting. Now we just have to figure out how to fund the construction up to those. So, and then this is a rendering of what the river promenade could look like. So the little, yeah. Go ahead.
Is that in the slag area?
So that is those.
SAG, I mean, the SAG area.
Well, that is almost directly across from where the power plant was.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the big piers coming out are those piers that exist now, where they used to load the sand.
I see. Okay.
So keeping those piers was a big deal, wasn't
Yes.
it? I remember we talked about that.
Yes. So really, and you know what's interesting is you won't see any of that from the rest of the park area because of the way the dunes are there. So that's all below the rest of the park area. Yes, go ahead, John. One other, it's just worth noting, this is an exciting project that happened last year, and because of COVID, we Didn't really get a chance to tell you all about it. Another donation that happened, this is, we are in the design and engineering phase, Grand Ravine's Treehouse. Go ahead. Fully funded by a donation. So it will be an overlook treehouse. The brown area headed to the top will be the new addition with some new parking and asphalt trail there. Go ahead. And it will be a walkway that will head out into the trees with a elevated platform and a small tree house that will essentially be fully handicap accessible and take you out into the treetops of the ravine. Go ahead. So, and that's the design of it. So, and that's been fully funded. So with our Parks Foundation. So all of these, so this, the two outfitted camping, Idema Explorers Camp, actually the Audubon study and the Grand River Identity Study was funded through our Parks Foundation as well. So all of those activities all have been funded through our Parks Foundation. Right. So I'm sorry that you had to listen to me this whole time. I had 3 different videos for you all to listen to instead of.
Send them to us.
Yes, I will. I'm sorry I was a bit rushed there.
Thanks, Jason.
At the end of the day, right, you would have had more questions if I.
That's right. Mr. County Commissioner, County Administrator, do you have any report for us?
You know, there's things I could say, but I think I'll pass on all but one thing. So next board meeting, we're back to normal, so to say, as far as all commissioners will be expected to be at the meeting physically. However, we are planning to continue with allowing the public to access either in person or via Zoom. You know, we've heard from some folks who are handicapped and others that it's much easier. If that is something you'd like to discuss further, we could put it on a work session agenda in the future. But I do think that at least at this point, it's smart to leave that access. And that's it.
General information, comments, or meetings attended? Anybody? All right, public comment. This is your second time. Harvey?
I should have been looking at my notes when I was before. One thing is the women give you a lot, or the ladies give a lot of information suggesting you research. I found out you don't use Google for research because Google is compromised so much you can't get a lot of this information that is out there. Use something like DuckDuckGo that will get you the information that you're actually looking for. One of the things that came up is a decrease in cases. I don't know how much you know about you've heard of the PCR test. Stands for polymerase chain reaction. Kary Mullis was the inventor or found that out or published that first. He received a Nobel Prize for that. He had arguments with Dr. Fauci because this technique is very, very powerful. What it does is it takes a nucleic acid molecule, and it could take one molecule. In one cycle, it now is 2. The next cycle is now 4. And his problem with this being used for analysis was that there's so much of a chance that if it's not calibrated properly, you'll have false negatives. Throughout all 2020, they ran this at 40 cycles. He suggested 17 would be max. The day after the president administration was inaugurated, they dropped it to 27. Mullis still said 17. Just to give you an idea of what's happening here is if you have one molecule, after 17 cycles, you would have 66,000. 27 cycles, what they're doing now, is 67 million. What they were running last year was 550 billion molecules. Thus, the whole group of people who are asymptomatic carriers that locked our country down. it's part of the statistics. Another thing too is if you look on the CDC site, they've now revised and said that the number of deaths, the 500,000 deaths, actually less than 5% were actually due to just COVID. All the other deaths had anywhere from 2 to 8 comorbidities. Most of it average was about 4. And yet they decided to label this as COVID, to put the fear into our country to lock us down. Oxford University also came out with a study just recently, peer reviewed, saying that if hydroxychloroquine had been used early, they could have saved 95% of the deaths that are on this world. Do your research in making your decisions. The mass for the young people is horrendous. It just makes me shiver because of what we've done to the young people and what they have done to the young people. I thank you so much.
Thanks, Harvey. Anyone else?
I've got people on Zoom.
You do? Okay.
Got 2 of them right now.
All right.
Shannon Felgner, she's up first. Shannon, are you there?
He's muted.
Shannon, you want to unmute yourself? Did you want to speak in public comment?
She had her hand raised, but
Okay.
you can try again, I guess, in a minute.
Who else do we have?
We also have Dana Odell.
Okay. Dana, go ahead. You have 3.
Hi. Okay, Dana Odell, not sure if you need it again, 3570 James Field Drive in Hudsonville. Again, thank you for all of your service. I just have one small request. I was recently looking at the commissioner bios on the miottawa.org website and noticed that a few commissioners don't have a bio. So I think it would be outstanding if those that are missing one could provide that information. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Anyone else?
Shannon put her hand down, so we are good.
All right. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Thank